have you been?
Yeah, good, good, John. Yeah. What about yourself? You well?
Yeah, I'm all right, mate. Thank you. All right. So before we get stuck into your rugby story, mate, where was home for you and who lived at home with you?
Yeah. I was born in London and grew up here for the first 7 years of my life. I'm back here now, although I've travelled a lot with rugby down the last, I don't know, 20, 30 years. But I'm here back in London now. But we moved to Dubai when I was 7 years old. So my dad was sent there for work, and so I grew up with my parents there, and my brother and sister. But then I was sent back to school in the UK, to a boarding school because at that stage, giving my age away, but in the mid 80s, there weren't many schools in Dubai, that were, that they were a couple, and so yeah, it was deemed the best thing for me was to send me back to the UK to boarding school. So I had a bit of a combination upbringing there.
So what does that entail, mate? Are you coming home with it? Did your brother and sister stay out there? Did they come with you?
Brother's quite a bit younger. My sister stayed there. My brother's quite a bit younger. So by that stage, my parents had moved back and we were, in the process of moving back to the UK. But then they moved back out shortly later to Dubai. Um, and yeah, I was, just after my 11th birthday, sent to to this, a countryside boarding school in the south, and yeah, and that was it. I was left to my own devices. It wasn't come back at the holidays, fly back out to Dubai. So yeah, when I've reflected on this a bit in the past, you have all these different experiences in life, and one of the things that I speak about quite often with my kids, I find myself talking about, is I was traveling by myself on a plane when I was 11, which when I think about it now is seems a bit crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
home alone style in it, Ben.
Yeah, it's bonkers. Yeah. And then when I think of like sending my 11-year-old, my three kids, if I want to let them go anywhere by themselves at 11, or anywhere near a plane by themselves.
Well, it was a very different place, though, mate. Wasn't it? To be fair,
Yeah,
yeah.
it
So,
was.
what boarding school did you go, mate? And was you able to play club sport at boarding school, or did school sport dominate the calendar?
Yeah, the school sport dominated the calendar. It was pretty much Wednesday, Saturday fixtures for most sports. We played rugby first term, football second term, and then primarily cricket third term. But you could get out, but like I didn't really go out at the weekends. I was sort of stuck at school, if you like, during the weekends. I didn't. My nearest guardians were my grandparents in London, so I didn't get out that often. Some guys went to play for local teams, so I played mostly school sport and played all different types of sport. There's lots of pros and cons of being at a boarding school, but one of the things is that I played sport every day. Both as part of the curricula, if you like, but also and we were really lucky with the facilities and everything like that, and some good staff. But then also you're influenced by the people around you, and you've got mates to play with 24/7, so having a kick around or throwing a ball around is something that you're doing every sort of spare opportunity, and obviously this is pre-screens, so you're doing a lot of it.
Good times.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what sport did you really take to, mate? Was you someone that delved in everything to see whether you liked it or not, or were you a bit
Well,
standoffish?
no, no. Well, actually, funny enough, when we moved to Dubai when I was 7, I wasn't a very good swimmer, and getting there, swimming was the main sport, and so I could barely swim really, and I was quite competitive. I think I don't know if it's inherent in me, but I was competitive, and I sort of pushed myself to get better at that because I didn't want to be the last anymore, and I didn't want to be the worst, and I wanted to, you know, just primarily that reason. I think not have the Mickey taken out of you, for not being very good at swimming. And so I pushed myself, and so I did that, and then I was always throwing a ball around. I loved just kicking a ball around, throwing a ball around, um, and I did a bit of everything. And then when I got to school in the UK, I had to do all those sports, but I loved football. Football was my main passion really until I was 16 maybe, and then the rugby slowly took over because I got a bit better at the rugby, and I started playing some club rugby, and then I'd been selected for some county stuff and some other representative stuff, and then you were playing sort of, I can remember, Thursday, Sunday as well as the Wednesday, Saturday. And
When you could.
yeah, and
Yeah,
then that sort of took over. So, but I loved football. You know what it's like in when you're a coach as well, and when you're a player, you see these levels, don't you? You know, and
yeah,
you get experience levels. And I was pretty small as a kid. I'm not huge now, but I was small. I was the youngest in the year. My birthday's the end of August, so I was always having to fight my corner, but enjoying the process, getting better. So the football was bit easier for me at first. Not easy, but easier than the rugby. And then as I sort of got a bit bigger, the rugby, I was able to compete a bit better in the rugby. So that became something I was a bit better at. But yeah, I always loved football. It was my first love, just, watching it, playing it, doing it whenever I could.
yeah. So before we touch on how that rugby journey and story is doing that, is is that sort of circumstance around football that is? Do you have trials for like town, maybe like your earlier team, district team, and then further on and
Yeah, with what I wasn't good enough at football, and that's the levels thing I was talking about. I remember playing this
yeah,
rep game that we played against these guys. I was about 16, and yeah, I was making up the numbers. I was a right back, and it was before you pretty much stayed. You did your one bit of your role, and it's not like nowadays where everybody's really good on the ball. But yeah, I just played against these guys, and then suddenly you just saw how good they were. And the team before me had played against guys, and Quinton Fortune was playing in one of the other rep teams that against us. And I didn't play against him, but he played in the team before. And I remember that Quinton Fortune, he played for Man United, the South African player. And suddenly you see these levels, and you just realise actually I'm not even anywhere close to that type of level. But at the same time, the rugby had sort of. But yeah, so I wasn't anywhere close to any of those rep teams. I wasn't good enough at football.
right? And you're a Chelsea fan, mate, aren't you?
No, yeah, no, I'm not actually.
Also,
I
I've
won't.
seen you with the club on. I just thought you were a fan. You were
Yeah, yeah,
coaching or
yes,
something, weren't you?
yeah. So what
Yeah.
happened was I'm a Wimbledon fan. I grew up as a Wimbledon fan.
Right.
So yeah, my
Yeah.
dad and my granddad both had season tickets, and I used to when I could get down there, I used to go to Plough Lane and then Sellers Park with my dad and my
Yeah.
granddad. And yeah, they first took me and used to go behind the on the terrace behind the goal at Wimbledon at Plough Lane, and then at Sellers Park later. And then the
Did they ground
Chelsea.
share for the bit that they Ben, sorry.
Yeah, they did
Did they?
because Wimbledon, yeah, I mean, acquired or they were trying to sell them and move them. At one stage, there was talk of them going to Dublin, and then they ended up going to Milton Keynes, becoming MK Dons, and obviously they've
Right.
restarted the journey again as AFC Wimbledon.
Yeah.
So I haven't got a season ticket at the moment or anymore, but I still watch them and still go along and support AFC
Right.
Wimbledon.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Chelsea connection, I ended up doing a bit of work. I was still playing, and funnily enough, I'd gone to try and play rugby league. Right at the end of my career, I'd left. I'd done a bit of England sevens, and I'd played with Henry Poole, and
Oh
I'd
yeah.
gone to play. He'd gone to London Broncos and then Harlequins, and I'd gone down there with him. And at the same time, I was doing some work, and I ended up working at Chelsea, and with the charitable partner, and doing like a lot of different types of roles, but basically really hands on. And so you probably see me in the Chelsea gear when. Yeah, I went to Ghana with Essien and Mourinho and Marcel Desailly and all these types of things, and a few other trips, and yeah, did quite a bit down there for 2.5 years.
So I know I'm jumping ahead of a little bit, but because which the viewers and listeners will find out in a bit, is you've
Hmm.
crossed sports and codes. Can you do you define intensity within them sports? So do you find any one sport more pressurized than the other, or because your roles differ, do you feel it differently?
You mean from a coaching point of view?
Yeah, and just being in
Uh,
that environment.
yeah, I think I wasn't, in the football environment, for example. I was there during Jose Mourinho's first stint as manager. And so a lot of the people that I was working with in the academy and who were coming through the system are now either managers in their own rights, or they've gone on to be good assistants or good coaches. There's guy called Joe Edwards, who's with Frank Lampard at Coventry now, and Joe was the Millwall manager. He was Thomas Tuchel's assistant when they won the Champions League at Chelsea. There's Chris Jones. He was the assistant coach with England with Gareth Southgate. There's a load of other guys. Paul Clement was working with Ancelotti. So and Mickey Beale now. He was at Rangers and he was at Liverpool before that, and a couple of other Premier League clubs. So when I speak to those guys, I mean, football, the intensity and the pressure is just completely different. You've got a matter of days to turn something around, or making it. You know what it's like. You lose three games, and people are talking about you losing your job.
Yeah,
So I guess I've never experienced that, and I've never had anything like that. All the other roles, even when I was working with, say, England Sevens, and in as the performance analyst, and you've got a year contract or whatever it is, and you're not under anywhere near the type of pressure you are if you're managing Chelsea or something like that.
yeah. Do you, before we go back, mate, sorry, to the 16-year-old you, in them elite environments, because you've been in plenty, haven't you? And we will go through them. Is there an open floor for coaches to develop? Are you encouraged to chime up? Are you encouraged to lead a certain part of a session?
Um, I think, when I reflect on the journey so far, so I was with Mourinho and at Chelsea for a bit, and I saw those other people, and the people I just name checked who've gone on
Yeah,
to be really successful managers and coaches. Um, and then the guys in the rugby environments I've seen in different rugby environments, crossing paths with people like John Mitchell, who's coached the All Blacks, he's coached England, he's now with the Red Roses, the women's rugby union women's team, um, and other guys. The, what shines through is when you have good people and they're really authentic and genuine and have integrity, they empower the people around them.
yeah,
And the good guys who aren't necessarily the youngest and experienced coaches, they're the more experienced coaches. They're not threatened by giving other people a platform, and in fact they thrive on being a mentor and helping people and empowering them because they know that helps the group.
yeah,
And so, it's different in different environments, but definitely with guys like Mitchell, John Mitchell, and some of those are more experienced coaches that I've come across and worked with. They're brilliant because they empower you, and they're also really hungry to learn, to continue learning, and they've got a growth mindset, and they're authentic. And so, if you can bring something that they haven't thought of or a different angle, then they're genuinely happy for that to happen because they're growing and everybody's getting better. And then the opposite is true as well. I found when people are under so much pressure, they're outcome focused only. They maybe it becomes about them. The team struggles because it's egotistical. It's about the leader as opposed to someone like, I don't know, Matt Pete at Wigan. He seems like a type of guy who it's not about him. And he's deflecting, and as a result, everybody else grows, and all his assistant coaches grow, and they're empowered.
right. No, I like that. So we'll go back to the 16-year-old you, mate, and you're in the middle of a rugby field. What did
Mm.
that offer you at that point when you stepped on and started your rugby story, basically? Was it a bit of freedom? Was it a contact that you were looking for? Was it friendship? How did it start?
Yeah, so earlier you asked me about the club rugby. I only played a bit of club rugby about that age then, and
Right.
it was because mates from school asked me to come and play for the local club that they were already members of, and that was a bit of the friendship. So you're fitting in. Um, I think, if I'm honest, like at school for me was about survival, really, and it was about sort of respect as well. So when I started just before that 16-year-old, I was trying to find my place in quite a tough environment at school, miles from family, and being good at something and excelling at something allowed you to lots of little small things. You'd eat different food. For example, you'd get a match tea if you played. And generally
Yeah.
the food was pretty rubbish. So,
Yeah.
so if you got a match tea, or you play, but also you got to do some good things and you didn't get as much flack and you got respect around the school. And that was initially what it was more than, and I loved competing. I loved winning. I always loved that. And like I talk about the swimming, I was just probably competitive. Um, so that was sort of intrinsically within me, the competitive element. Um, so as a 16-year-old, I think it was a bit of everything. It was like, oh, I found something I'm okay at. I'm actually, if I put effort in and hard work in, I can get something from this as well. and I sort of that clicked a bit with the sort of that hard work and reward, correlation that clicked when I was about 16. And I did I started training a bit in the off season. I'd always done running and stuff in the off season by myself or with my dad if I could. Um, but I started doing weights for the first time, and then when the next season started, I felt the benefit of that, and people sort of recognised that I was playing better, and I guess that sort of kicked me on as well.
Right. So in conjunction with that, mate, what type of student was you, and did you enjoy school?
Did I enjoy school? It's a big question, isn't it? Yeah, I enjoyed elements of it.
A lot of us found it very social. Like that's what I've found with this, because probably around our age, mate, because there's not a big difference between us. You probably sole focus was one. I remember back when I was younger, multiple sports, like you were just focus on the one you enjoy most. Where now if it's like multi-diverse, isn't it? You get told to go and try everything.
Yeah, and I did enjoy school. I enjoyed the sport basically.
Yeah.
Academics, I wasn't very good, and I was okay. But I learned a lot since school. I think from traveling and meeting different people. I grew a lot in that process, and from having quite an international upbringing with us moving abroad when I was a kid, meeting lots of different people, meeting people from countries that I wouldn't have never even heard of, because I suddenly meet them in the UAE, in Dubai, or they're all international students at my school as well, because that was quite a diverse group of people. So I did enjoy it, but I wasn't very academic. But like I said, it was more about survival for me with schooling. When I've reflected recently, it was more about that. It was, I was away in the middle of the countryside at a boarding school, which was quite, back in the day was quite, I guess, quite a tough experience, quite isolating, quite lonely. Nowadays people talk about mental health and stuff like that. I think they'd probably have, if they'd gone back there, they'd probably have a field day.
Right. Because us public school, mate, we wouldn't think that, would we? Like, let's not
Uh,
lie to you. I'm not going to lie to you. We wouldn't. We'd think it was hunky dory. You're comfortable and everything's given to you. You don't really have to necessarily work hard. That would probably be my impression when I was a kid.
Yeah, I think there's always pros and cons. Don't get me wrong. I feel
Yeah.
really lucky that I went and had a great start because of the sport. I was playing sport, like I said, every day, and I would play, um, but as a dad myself with three kids, I love being around them every day. I didn't see my parents that often, and I'm really grateful because they did set me up in a lot of ways. So I don't say it in a negative way, and I'm not definitely
Yeah.
not saying, "Oh, poor me," because I'm really grateful
No,
and I
it's not coming
recognize.
across like that either. Yeah.
So and yeah, and my parents didn't have that situation either. From their, they didn't come from.
Yeah.
They came from. My dad put himself through Kingston Polytechnic after having been a milkman and dustbin man and stuff like that. And had done some hard jobs, and then he managed to get a corporate type of job, and that's how he got posted to Dubai. And so I was, they gave me an opportunity that they themselves didn't have. So I don't. I'm very, very grateful, but it wasn't the easiest thing, mate. Yeah, I'm a bit older than you, so like we're talking sort of late
A
80s,
lot.
90s, and
Yeah.
yeah, a long way from home, and no mobile phones, no connection, no internet. So yeah, but it's just you adjust, don't you? And it's probably shaped me, and it shaped the next 20 years of what I did because it gave me a drive, it gave me a desire to succeed, and all those things.
Not that, mate. Before really networking was a thing, you've had to network from a young age without the help of
Yeah.
all what we've got now. And then,
Yeah,
yeah,
mate,
it's
I've never
sort
thought
of
of that.
encouraged
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
I never thought of it like that, actually. Yeah, it's a really good point. Yeah, and I guess I wasn't afraid just to pick up the phone, and just because that was quite a normal thing to do, I guess. Um, so yeah, just when I left school, I knew that I wanted to be as good a the game wasn't professional, but rugby union wasn't professional. So I left school and I knew I wanted to be the best I could be at rugby. And I didn't know how good that was. I wasn't amazing at school by any means. And if you'd asked anybody at school, teachers or players, kids I went to school with, if I'd been a professional rugby player, they would have laughed at you. But I took myself off to New Zealand. I worked for a few months, and I basically I laboured during the day, and then I worked in a pub at the night, and then a couple of nights a week I trained. I was at London Irish as a kid, so I trained there. I went, and I wasn't the quickest, so I went and joined an athletics club, and I did track a couple of nights a week as well. And then I saved up and I took myself off to New Zealand, and as an 18-year-old, and I went to play there in the bottom of the South Island, New Zealand, because I figured that they're the best, so I want to go and try and learn from them. And so I worked in the forestry, and I just grafted and put myself in that sort of situation. And I guess I'd organised that. And so when your point then, I hadn't even thought of that really. Reflecting on that, I just picked up the phone and asked people, "Can I come out and play in New Zealand?" And this is
Yeah,
before footage or CVs or anything like that,
exactly. It's ballsy, Ben. It is.
Yeah, I mean, I get, yeah, I hadn't even thought about that. Yeah, I guess it was just, what else would I do? Go off to, I don't know, I did just what
Especially
I
for your
thought.
age, mate, as well. Because what's the worst he could have said is no. But when you're in your early to mid teens, that's horrific and to know, isn't it? Like
Yeah,
rejection's everything we all of us don't want. But
yeah.
for you to still pick up and do it, mate, I think that takes something.
Thanks, mate. Yeah, yeah, it was a great experience as well. I really encourage anybody to do it because it was just I had no, again with my parents thinking now if my 18-year-old went out and did that and there was no contact, there was nothing, there
Yeah,
was like it was just a point on a map that there
yeah,
was. I remember they picked me up actually. I flew into Invercargill. I flew via Hong Kong. I flew down to Invercargill, which is the very bottom of the South Island in New Zealand. I get to Invercargill and the guy picked me up, and he's an absolute legend of a guy. And but he had a mobile phone, a car phone, and I was like, oh wow, I didn't even think they had car phones here.
oh.
So that's a bonus. Yeah.
So when you touched on London Irish a little bit then,
Mm,
and like you said, it's pre-pro, isn't it?
yeah.
What's the conversation like about leaving London Irish to go do a little bit? It's did you
Mate,
stuck around, so I suppose it's not so much traveling, but another lifestyle.
yeah, I think they probably thought you'd come back, and they were. It wasn't be the game wasn't pro yet, and a game actually went pro when I was in New Zealand in '95. So and so that was an incredible experience when that sort of happened. That changed a bit for me, not immediately, but so when I left London Irish, I think it was just people just come and go type thing, and they just didn't think much of it. I don't think they thought there was a couple of our local my coaches who probably had an all right opinion of me,
Yeah.
but in the like yeah at the time actually it's funny. Clive Woodward was the coach of the senior team. Yeah, so
Right.
yeah. But he wouldn't have known who I was, so I wasn't on his radar, and I was just some small kid who was a sort of just turned 18. So
Yeah.
it wasn't really, I wasn't like a child prodigy type thing, and I wasn't huge, and I wasn't knocking down his door. So yeah, they didn't think much
But
of
you were
it
there,
probably.
weren't you? Yeah.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
were there. Yeah.
yeah.
So how did you feel the standard was from what you were doing at London Irish to what you were doing in Invercargill?
I remember getting to New Zealand and just, yeah, I literally got off the plane on the Friday, and then they said, "Okay, are you all right to play tomorrow?" And I was on the side of the field, and it was just small club rugby at first, before I played some rep stuff. But it was men's rugby for the first time as well. So like I
Mm.
was playing for a
Which is
club.
big in it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was a really, really steep learning curve because and they looked after me. They were amazing guys, but they were all hard local guys who were farmers and had been decent players, but they were still just amateur players. So if they were picked it was in the days where if you could be a good club player, play for your local club, and you'd still play for the provincial, side for Southland. Um, and Southland at the time were in the top division of the NPC, of the three divisions, and so I was playing week in week out against these guys who were playing rep rugby. They'd be an all black trialist. This guy had played, this guy had played Southland 20 games, 30 games. This guy had played Southland Country. This guy had played, and that Southland A. And every week you'd be
Yeah.
up against someone like that, and you'd get a lesson, a really big lesson every week. So the big thing, it wasn't tired. It wasn't as fast as like the under 19 and Colts and under 20 rugby that I've been playing in London Irish, but initially mostly. But then it was the physicality and adjusting and men's rugby, and also just waking up and becoming an adult in that adult changing room for the first time. It was just, you can imagine it was a bit of a shock to the system actually.
I imagine. Well, yeah, because there's intricacies on and off the field, mate, and finding your seat.
Yeah.
If there's joking aside, like if there's sweets there, what the big lads enjoy more, so you get the one that they don't, or Jaffa cakes, it would have been and stuff like that. It's
Yeah,
that
yeah,
stuff in
yeah.
it, the right peg, and then
Oh,
it's
mate, yeah, yeah, 100%.
the
I remember
cue to
sitting
get
in the
on the
wrong
pitch.
place. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. You don't get on the bus first, blah, blah, blah. You don't
yeah.
do this, no, all that type of stuff. Yeah, you have to
And that's
sing
just
this
before you
song.
play.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah. You
yeah,
just like, but yeah, all that type of stuff. But they were amazing people, and just, yeah, it was a really steep learning curve, but amazing for me.
yeah. So how did you feel your growth went early doors there, mate? Did it take long to adjust? And when did the vet rugby show its face?
I think if I reflect back that period, although again, if you when I left there in New Zealand, if you'd said to them, "Oh, this guy's going to be a professional rugby player," they wouldn't have laughed at you. Now it wouldn't be so much laughing, but they'd go, "Nah, no chance," or he's too small, or something along those lines. Not because they weren't, critical, but just because they were that would be their assessment at that stage. But
And the game
where
was
I'd
probably
come
more like that, Ben. Sorry.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and where I'd come from, but if they'd seen the trajectory that I'd gone on from where I was a year and a half before to then being with them, they would have gone, okay, that's crazy because he's gone from here to here in this short in a year and a half, where he'd been in the B team at school and he hadn't been playing. I'd been playing fullback and centre, and suddenly I moved to open side flanker in rugby union, and I'm playing as a seven, and so because I was getting involved loads and my skill set, and I probably didn't have the top end pace to play all those back positions, so I've gone then moved to the back row, and if they'd seen the growth, personal growth in me, they probably would have maybe thought differently. But when I look back, that was a huge turning point because I was quite fearless after that experience of going to New Zealand when I was 18. I came back then. I would have stayed, but I had a place at university at Cardiff University, so I came back for that. But I wanted to stay in New Zealand, and but when I came back, I realised how much I'd grown because I was like then seeing people who I played with at London Irish, and I was then playing university rugby, and to go from playing against provincial players who maybe an All Black trialist or something like that, and then you're suddenly playing club rugby, university rugby, and this is as the game's gone pro, I was just like, this is like playing with 14, 15 year olds, from that mentality point of view, from the physical hardness point of view, all those types of things. So that was probably the biggest turning point for me.
So you noticed that growth at the time as well. You've not had to look back.
Yeah, I completely noticed
Yeah.
it. Yeah, I was just like,
Right.
and to the point where I got to university, and I wanted to play for the university, but I was like, oh, I need to find it. I thought the university rugby would be higher. I need
Yeah.
to find a club, a decent club to play for. And then I looked at traveling back to London Irish, but it was just too far, and every 2, 3 times a week, from Cardiff. And so I was just like, then okay, I need to find a club to play for because the gap is. But then I think if you keep pushing yourself, you keep going to that point where you surround yourself with better than people that are better than you, and then you push yourself, and you're just trying to get better and better. And I think sometimes it's obviously a good process to go through for many reasons, but also there's some difficult elements to that because if you're not careful, you can never be satisfied either.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was constantly looking for the higher
What
level, the
next?
better
Yeah.
level. Yeah, what's next?
Yeah.
And so that was definitely something I had to deal with as well, a bridge I had to cross as well.
Right. Just a couple of things there then, mate. So one, you were never satisfied being a big fish in a little pond, is what I've just got from that. You always wanted to mix it with the fish in the bigger pond that was across the road all the time. And two, how did you deviate from full back to centre? Because they're very different. And
Yeah.
then the transition from that open, wide space to nice dark art stuff in the back row. How did all that work?
Yeah, the big. So I would say I was never a big fish, and so, but yeah, you're 100% right. I was never satisfied, and I've always like gone on, and I think it's the nature of the beast when you listen to someone like Johnny Wilkinson talk, and obviously we're completely different levels of player and ability and outcome, success, etc. But when you hear him, I can relate to some of the stuff he talks about, because I think if you'd said to me as a 17-year-old at school, oh, you can play one professional rugby match or 10 professional right, I would have bitten your arm off, But then when you get that to that position, you go, well, uh, why can't I do 50 games? And you're like, well, why can't I do 100? And then if you're doing that, you're thinking, well, I've just played against every other contender for my position to play for England, so why can't I play for England? And so I think that if you've got that in you, I don't know where that comes from, if that's nature or nurture, but there was definitely an element of that. And so I was never a big fish, but I was pushing to get better and just fulfill my potential, I think. Um,
Yeah.
and with regards to centre and fullback, like I played it all across the back line as a kid, but I wasn't quick enough. So at school, and I was tiny. So I started as a scrum half. And like I said, my birthday's the end of August. I was the youngest kid in the school when I joined. But I played football since a young age, so I could kick a ball and do things like that. So I played scrum half, I played fly half for the B team, a
You
bit of
see
set.
space as well, don't you? Because both sports, that's what's key.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. And because of my lack of pace, and I'm being a bit critical, but I wasn't quick. But because of my lack of pace, and I was quite one-paced at that age, I had to develop all my other skills, so that I had to develop the ability to bring people into the game or do other things or recognize that, and I developed that as I got, throughout the professional part of my career. I definitely developed that because I knew, again, comparing me to, say, I don't know, going to Wasps and comparing me to someone like Lawrence Delalio, we're like, he's a legend who can do everything on and off. He's an absolute like beast, but in the gym and
Yeah.
in every respect, 6'4", fast, physical. Well, I'm not going to be able to do that, but I know that if you give me the ball and I receive the ball in the next 3 seconds, these are my three options now, because I've already scanned and I know that could hit you at the back. I could go there. I could kick to that. And I was always having to think like that and process. And I think that now as a coach, when you talk about skill acquisition theory with people and you you read all the books from the professors, a big element of that is that you have to have learned because of your inabilities, and you've developed skills based on what you can't do. And, I'm going off on a bit of a tangent, but you see with Frank Lampard, for
Oh,
example, he
yeah.
developed that 360 vision because at first he wasn't considered that athletic as a kid. Um, and and so you develop these other abilities. So I did that to an extent at school. But so I had the other stuff, and really I wasn't quick enough, and there were other kids who were better than me in the back line at fullback and at centre. Fullback I preferred, but then centre was just to get into the game a bit more, and I wasn't as quick. So but if I played 12, I could be quite direct and run. And
Getting
then there
ball
were other
stuff.
people, yeah, and there were other people
Yeah.
better. I did that off season in the gym, and when I came back, um, they said, "Look, do you want to try playing flanker?" And
Yes.
we need, yeah. And I remember the first trial game actually. I'd just taken this high ball. Then they moved me to centre. I'd done something. I'd had a carry. I'd done, I'd been strong on the carry. I'd been tackled but not held. I'd rolled, picked the ball up. I'd gone again. I did about three or four things like that. And in this trial match, they said, "Oh, do you want to have a run at seven?" I was like, "I've never played seven. I've never played in the forwards before." They're like,
Yeah.
"Just have a run and just do what you're doing." And I did, and then they went, "Okay," then, and so yeah, it went from there.
At least your one pace wasn't reversed like mine, though, was it?
Oh, what say again? What did you say?
Yeah, at least
Say
your
again?
one pace wasn't reversed like mine.
Mate, I was really one pace, really slow. It was like,
Oh,
yeah,
mate,
but
I'm mega slow, mate. But that's where like your hand and your vision, like you said, comes into play then, doesn't it? So I'll
yeah,
be honest, I think back row's the best position on the field, mate. It's like you're
yeah,
involved in everything, aren't you? Your connection between your forwards and backs, and you're a bottle winner.
yeah. I loved it. Yeah, it was the best. I mean, I can definitely thought it was the best position, especially open side. Or it was just. But then it's just evolved a bit now. And when I played in South Africa, I played six because they do it slightly differently there. Um, and then I played some eight as well. But yeah, definitely the back row is just you're constant, especially if you're playing in Britain, and you're freezing. I couldn't think of anything worse than being out on the wing or something like that.
No,
I
touching the
think
ball twice.
genuinely, I probably would have stopped. I mean, I've seen people now.
Yeah,
Oh, you go and watch a game. You walk in through the park and you see a game, and there's this guy on the wing, and the ball never comes to him. And I'm thinking,
leave blue.
uh, Yeah,
Yeah,
I'd be like, you want to be in the right in the middle, keep warm.
yeah. I think that's where sometimes I know we're being a bit jovial, but you just got to go and find it, mate, aren't they? Whether
Yeah,
it's like I think Jack Noah epitomises that. He comes in for the carry, he helps the forwards out, doesn't he? I think you've got to go and do that type of thing. I think Denny
yeah,
Solomona was quite good at it as well, actually.
yeah. He was an incredible player, wasn't he, Denny? Like amazing
Yeah,
finisher as well. Yeah, definitely. And I think good coaches and just know what people are good at, and then they build a game model around them. I think they say like this: these people, this is their strengths, these are their attributes. How can we use them to their best of the ability and get them as many touch? I never understand when a coach doesn't do that.
yeah,
If you've got a player who is really really good at what they do, you want them to do it as many times as possible in a match, and they want to
yeah.
do it as many times as possible. So you create as many scenarios to get your best guys doing what they're good at. And I think,
Regular comfortably, yeah.
yeah, and so Jack Noel come in and off his wing and doing pick and go and being physical, and it's a good example.
Mm. So you mentioned, mate, London Irish was a bit of a trek from Cardiff Uni and stuff. So what was the next step for you rugby wise?
Yeah, I was lucky. We had a guy came and coached us at the university, and he asked me to come for a trial in the off season. After 1 year, he asked me to go to Caerphilly, which was Caerphilly at the time had been a bit of a yo-yo team between the Premiership and the top league. This is before the regions and the
Yeah,
first division, and they were back in the first division. And he asked me to come down, and so I went down there, had a train for a couple of weeks, and then they offered me a contract, and it was my first. Um, it was semi-pro. We trained in the
yeah,
evenings, but yeah, first paid contract, and yeah, it was an incredible experience. Loved it. Amazing people, just very sort of the earth, down to earth, guys who just. I didn't speak for about 3 or 4 months. Just, I'm English.
yeah,
depending where you're from, I could sound posh, and I'm a student, and I
yeah,
get to this like really tough like town, valley town, and I was like, I'm just gonna play and not talk, and the good thing about being a seven as well is you can do a lot of things for the team. You can basically get your head kicked in to win the ball for the team, and you can
yeah,
put your head where nobody else wants to try and steal the ball, and you can tackle as many people as you can, and in a game and try and affect change like that. And so I did that, and so I sort of I then spoke. I remember very clearly after about 3 months, I said something, or someone saying something, and I just took the mickey out of somebody. And I remember a couple of them went, "Hey, he speaks." I remember it clear as crystal. Yeah, so it was really funny, but yeah, but they were top lads.
So are you taking the New Zealand style of play there, or are you now creating the Ben brand now? And are you finding
Nah,
how you want to
neither.
play?
Yeah, neither. To be honest with you, John.
Right.
Yeah, but because I was again doing that thing that you described really well earlier. I was just trying to improve and go to another tough environment. So these guys were all better than me. They were all, the Wales under 21 coach was our coach, and so I was then just having to not catch up, but I was playing senior rugby in a different environment. I was still only 19, so I was still trying to just push myself in that environment to
Yeah.
be not just a bit part player. So I wasn't really. I'd taken all the learnings obviously from everywhere, but also the game's changing and you're having to do different player, different style based on what the coach wants and what your strengths are and what you can offer to the team and how they want you to play. So I was just trying to adapt and fit in, and then learn on the job basically.
So you've led me on quite nice to an idea then, mate. So what type of on-field learner was you? Could you ask questions or did you watch actions?
I was pretty quiet, to be honest with you. I didn't
Yeah,
ask many questions until I was very, very comfortable, or if at all. And I think only on later on in certain environments did I ask questions. I think the way we were taught as well, the coaching was less, it was more sort of dictatorial. So you were told what to do, and
autocratic.
then yeah, it was autocratic. It was
Yeah,
definitely wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't. We weren't empowered. It was like this is what you're going to do, And if you ask questions in certain environments, then you were a troublemaker, So you weren't necessarily encouraged to ask questions or have input, really. And to a certain extent, at different stages, depending on the age of the group that you're training, you as a coach, if your team is, maybe there's two or three groups in your, maybe they're 18 to 20, 22, 23, 24 to 30, and 30 onwards, three different distinct groups of player. If I'm chiming in as a 19-year-old with, asking loads of questions, I'd probably need to listen a lot more and just try and learn a lot, because, and if not 50% of the team is in that youngish group,
Yeah.
then it doesn't necessarily need to be a big chat and asking everybody's opinion, does it? But there's definitely, obviously, different ways of doing that, and each part of the journey requires a slightly different way of coaching. But yeah, I was a pretty head down, quiet type of person. I didn't speak unless I was spoken to, especially in that environment. There were a lot of senior players around me. So we had like a guy called Roger Bidgood in the centre, who played a few times for Wales, absolute legend, sort of took me under his wing. And so I just asked him a couple of questions. I actually asked the senior players. There's a guy, Christian Ferris, an amazing hooker, great guy. Didn't get capped, should have, for Wales. Hooker. I'd sort of speak to him about my training, and Rog, and then a couple of other boys. And then at the back, we had a guy called Brett Davey, who, I remember in my first game, he scored 45 points. Like we smashed the team, but he scored 45 points. He went on to play for Pontypridd and didn't get capped, was in some Welsh training squads. So I used to speak to him as well and ask him his opinion and stuff. So you'd have those sounding boards that I would go to, but I wouldn't be going up to the coach or putting my hand up in a team meeting and like going, what do you think about this? Or why are we doing that? I'd just be head down.
That's fair enough. And a lot of the learnings come on the bonding trips, mate, whether there's alcohol involved or not, don't they? That's the real lesson when you get to know each other on a level beyond the field, innit?
Yeah, I think that, and definitely for me, it was about what I could do to win or earn respect. So how I played, and so that definitely I felt more at home, and then you can be yourself once you've done that a few times. And then yeah, I do remember we had some good away games and tough games, and you'd play some tough opposition and do okay, and then you'd have a good trip. And the guys, I was laughing because the other day something came up, and it came up on Facebook, and it was this, I don't know, someone shared it. It was like this place we used to go out in Caerphilly, like afterwards. And I only went there a couple of times, but I was laughing. It's this club, and I've forgotten the proper name of it, but we called it the Zoo. It was like it was quite funny going there. It wasn't, like you can imagine, it wasn't the nicest place in town. So, but I was laughing because the boys took me there the first time I've gone there, and there's a bit of scuffle has broken out, and we've gone outside, and I'm like, oh man, what's that all about, And we've just won a game, um, and a couple of the boys that I worked with were teachers. Yeah, that I played with were teachers. They'd gone to Cardiff Met and they'd become PE teachers and stuff, and so it's kicked off, and this kid's come up, and he's fighting, and he I don't know how old he is. So I said, what's going on? And the guys are gone, oh, that's one of his pupils. He's like 15, and he's just had a pop at him. And the guy is my teammate who's had a pop at is a big boy, and there was a big group of us. I was saying, fair play, like some
Yeah,
front on you.
that
But yeah, I
Dutch
remember.
courage, innit?
Yeah. But he was like, yeah, oh, there's my teacher over there. I'm going to kick off and give him a good hiding as a 15-year-old. I was like. But that stuff like that, it still sticks out now, and it's funny that because that does bond you. There's a lot of laughter, and when we catch up, as you just reminisce about some of those funny stories.
You do, mate, and fundamentally, that I feel that's what it's about. But when I was playing, I didn't appreciate that.
Me too, probably. Yeah. I
Yeah,
think when I reflect on all the cool places I played, I was lucky to play 3 years in South Africa. I played in New Zealand. I had wherever I've been, the things you do remember, maybe that half hour afterwards in the change room when and you just, that's sort of inner sanctum type thing. And you can look across at somebody, and, you've done your job and they've done their job. And there's just a respect there and an appreciation for each other. And the shared experience that you can't really explain to people. And then those moments, and then those other moments on some of those journeys, and invariably when something goes wrong or something like that, you get stuck somewhere and yeah. I even now thinking about it, I remember getting stuck in, I think it was Cork Airport, and before you know it, like we're there, and there's this, I don't know what's gone wrong, but we're there for hours, and suddenly I'm just hearing on the mic, "Duh, duh, duh," and suddenly I'm hearing Elvis being sung across one of the whole airport, and I'm like, I recognize that voice, and they're not out
Yeah,
announcing like when our plane is coming, someone's singing Elvis. But it's like stuff like
brilliant.
that you remember, isn't it? And
Yeah.
they're the good times, yeah.
Yeah. So how did Caerphilly come to an end, mate? And where was you going?
Yeah, I basically I don't think I was. We managed to win the league and get back into the Premiership, and I wasn't. I don't know if I would have been kept on anyway,
Yeah.
because they were like revamping this squad for a push back again in the top division. And at the
Right.
time, there were no regions, so you're playing against this, Cardiff and Bridgend and the
Yeah.
Scarlets and some really good teams. So it was and Swansea, and it was tough. And Pontypridd were in Europe and doing really well. Some really good teams. So there were some good players in Wales at that stage and quite a lot of depth. And at the same time, I wanted to go full time,
Yeah.
and so I had the opportunity to go to London Scottish. I wrote to a load of clubs. I wrote to a load. I went to visit West Hartlepool. A guy called Mike Brewer, former All Black, was coaching up in West Hartlepool. He asked me to come up. I went up and I trained there for a week or 2 weeks and did okay. Um, and Bedford asked me to go training as well, similar sort of thing. I actually went over to France and met a club there, stayed for a week there, trained there, and then Bedford were really interested, nearly signed for Bedford, and then they went through a couple of sort of administrative difficulties, and it was looking like they weren't going to have the funds basically to stay in the division, and it actually came to pass not long after that. But at the same time, London Scottish had said, "Look, if you're still available, can you come over?" And I didn't go and train with them or anything first. They just said, look, can you sign for us? um, and it was a very small, like, junior deal, contract, but it was just an opportunity. At the time, they were one of the 14 teams in the Premiership, and so I had an opportunity. Simon Holmes was the open side and the captain, and he was going to be away with Scotland for a bit because he was a Scotland player. So I thought, it's a great opportunity, and it's in Richmond, which isn't far away from where I was living. So it was really good.
Was that the done thing then? Then was it then where you'd have to sort of train and trial? Was that common?
I think it depends on the level of player. My level of player, yeah, probably. I hadn't
Yeah.
played like England under 21 or Wales under 21 or anything like that.
Right.
Yeah, I think you know what it's like if you're known. I was never a known player in inverted commas. I hadn't played any school age group international stuff. I hadn't played any England pathway stuff. My school, although we played a lot of sport, we weren't a rugby school, if you like, and
Yeah.
so I wasn't known. And so when you go to any of those trials, you've got the rep coach is a teacher from, I don't know, some school wherever, and I didn't go to, and so there's a ceiling.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have been good enough anyway, but there were better players than me
To be honest, Ben, what we I think you're being really polite about it. I won't lie. And I can see a little grin. You
Oh
rock up and they're
no.
all in that gear from the year before. They all know each other. The
Yeah,
dads
and
and
so I
mums are
wasn't.
doctors, surgeons. It's
Yeah,
that's just
yeah.
how it works. Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't in that pathway, and so like when I had to go for trials basically, because nobody knew who I was, and I was a bit surprised, not but surprised, but I couldn't understand how bad some of the scouting, if you like, or tracking of players was, because if I had been playing for Cardiff, I don't know, a university first team, and I'd been in the university championship at Twickenham, and they play a final of whatever it was called, Boosa maybe, I think, before Bucks. If I'd been
Yeah.
in that, there would have been some eyeballs on it, and
Yeah.
people might have been talking. If I'd gone to Loughborough or Durham, I think, and maybe people might have talked. But at the time, I was playing in the Welsh First Division for Caerphilly, and we were going really well. We got to the Swalet Cup, and we, quarter final, and we played against Scarlets, and I was playing against Pontypridd in the week, and I was playing against Dale McIntosh, and who was one of the form back rowers in Europe at the time. He played that amazing game in the European Cup against Bath and people like that. And then I was playing against Ebervale and Kingsley Jones, the Welsh open side at the time. He was captaining them and playing. Then I was playing against Cardiff on a midweek night, and they were fully loaded, and Jonathan Davies is playing, and all these other people, and then suddenly, like but if I played university first team and I'd gone to a good university, then I probably would have been on the radar of some of those teams, but I wasn't at all. So then I was writing to people to try and get a trial, basically.
Right. Again, networking without realizing probably how important it was.
Yeah, and well, it was a bit more intentional, and so with the West Hartlepool thing, Mike Brewer at the time, he'd been an All Black and he'd played for Otago, and I did, and then he played for Canterbury, and I sort of we had a few mutual connections, not good connections by any means, and I didn't use them to reach out to him, but when I say not good ones, they weren't close people to me, not people I'd spoken to, and it wasn't like it was pre-email, and so but I knew of him.
Pre-dial up.
Yeah, you just ring up.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah.
so no, I just had to call. Yeah. So it was before dial up on the old yeah. And so I had to just reach out, and I'd heard he may be open minded. He works hard. He likes good opens. If you're hungry and you're fit and you train hard, then he's the type of guy who will give you a crack. So that's why I approached him. Paul Turner at Bedford. Um, Roger Bidgood, who I mentioned before, had played for Wales with Paul Turner, and so I reached out to Paul Turner, said, "Look, Roger's, giving me your number. Can I come and train?" And so that's how that came about. And so it was, yeah. I guess I was networking, but on that sort of level.
And thankfully it come about, didn't it, mate? And how was your spell there? And again, what was the standard like compared to what you've been involved with?
Yeah, London. I mean, it was every time I moved, it was a step up, so it was
Yeah,
quite hard. So at that stage, anyway, it was a step up, and yeah, it was good. It was decent. It was tough. I wasn't playing enough. I really trained hard, but I wasn't playing enough. There was no A League, so we played like
yeah,
some of the cup stuff, and then yeah, you were playing like what was it called, the Cheltenham and Gloucester Cup, and all these types of things. But you weren't
right,
playing enough of the league game, and we weren't a big squad. We were pretty, we had some good players. We had Guy used to be at 9, played for Ireland. We had Yanni De Beer at 10. We had Simon Holmes and Simon Fenn in the back row, and we had some good players, and so it was a good experience learning. But it was early days of professional rugby as well, so like they didn't know what to do. We
yeah,
didn't. We were left to our own devices in between training. Like we would just, okay, well, how many hours are we training? It was just like, okay, we'll do more weights and we'll do more contact sessions and we'll do, you know, and we were managed okay in some respects. In other respects, it was just the time. People didn't know how to recover even, so it was more like what you'd, if you were interested in training, like I always was you'd be reading what do bodybuilders do, how they putting on weight, how they training, what they doing, what have the rugby league guys that have been professional for longer been doing, and you'd be copying, stuff that you'd been hearing on the grapevine of what other people are doing.
yeah. Because what I didn't know is they used to come over in the off season and play for clubs, didn't they? And then go back and stuff like Gary told me the other week.
Yeah, I remember when he came to Harlequins, that was crazy. So you had
Yeah,
and funny enough, I caught up with Brian Ashton about a week ago, and Brian Ashton was the Bath coach when um, Henry Paul came over and Jason Robinson came over, and they played for Bath.
right.
Um, and yeah, so Robbie Paul came over, Gary Connolly came over, and then Henry and Jason Robinson came over as well, but for a very short period. But that was, yeah, is when rugby was yeah, it was very early in its, it was in its infancy of professionalism.
Yeah. So how did you go about getting game time? Was you comfortable at this point to approach a coach, or I imagine a director of rugby weren't really a thing then, Ben, was there?
Yeah, we had two good coaches. We had a director of rugby, John Steele, and then we had Alan
Right.
Zonda, who's South African, who was our head coach. Um, yeah, it was. We'd have some conversations, but I knew like Simon Holmes was he was the captain, he was the seven, he was Scotland Open side. So there comes a point, it's quite difficult when you're not playing, where you can sort of hit a ceiling of learning. You almost need to, and so we didn't have a big enough squad to play midweek games because the squad just wasn't deep enough. So without injury, so you'd have to preserve people for the weekend. So that was really challenging, and especially across certain positions, I think you need to definitely need a runner games more than other positions. I think we all need a runner games, but like in the back row, especially open side, and you're reading the game and you're playing with people and you're learning what they do and you've got match fitness. It takes about 3 or 4 games to hit your straps. But if you're playing
Yeah.
one game and then you don't play another game for 3 or 4 weeks and you're just training, it's pretty difficult to. So yeah, what happened was that London Scottish actually folded that year. We merged in inverted commas with Richmond and London Irish, and they wanted to reduce the Premiership from 14 to 12 teams. And so I was I was only there for a short period of time because the club merged, and so I was out of contract, and yeah, and then I moved on, and so I went to Saracens. Alan, my head coach, went to Saracens, and I ended up joining him there initially as World Cup cover for Richard Hill because he was playing in the World Cup, and but it was a similar situation for me. I just wasn't playing, and I'd gone, because I was stuck behind some of those guys. Francois Pienaar was the captain and World Cup winner. Richard Hill was there, Tony Diprose was there, and a couple of other good players. And as a result, I didn't play still, and so not long after that, I chose to move. I'm sure they wouldn't have kept me anyway, because we had 18 internationals in the squad. It was an amazing squad. Dave Flatman, Julian White, George Shooter, Danny Grewcock, Scott Murray, Thierry Lacroix, Kieran Bracken, Tom Shanklin, Dan Luger. It was just fully loaded with some amazing guys and good players, and so I wouldn't have played. So I chose to move on then, and to try and play more and get more game time.
Before you left, mate, could you have foreseen the trajectory that Saracens were on? I know literally you've just named like 18 internationals, but it doesn't make necessarily a good team, does it? Or a
No,
good
they went.
environment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they went on a lean period. At that stage, they'd signed. Before that, they'd signed Philippe Sella, Michael Liner, two of the best ever players at the time, and then they got Francois Pienaar in, and then the year I was there, they got Tim Horan in, the Australian centre. But they still then didn't win, and they went through so many different coaches. They went through maybe 6 coaches in 7 years or something like that. You had
Most that, mate, in it.
yeah, you had. I
Yeah.
think. Yeah, you had people like Wayne Shelford, Buck Shelford, the former All Black, and you had all these different coaches came and left. And then so only the success only came much later, and
Right.
yeah, much later. But yeah, learned so much at that time. Some really good people there. That was so much more professional than the Scottish. I think because of the people at Saracens, but because of the funding and also the stage they were on in their development and their process with some of the guys that had come in from overseas. And Nigel
Yeah.
Ray, the owner as well, just invested, and he was a visionary really in so many ways.
Remember Brian Ashton coached Vale against us at the Wits, and he labelled us the most boring team he's ever coached against. We won, like, but he gave us some stick, mate. So
Yeah,
when you're in and around these players, sorry, mate, go on.
no, he's had an incredible career, hasn't he, Brian? Yeah, he's
He
done
has,
some
mate.
amazing
Yeah,
things.
he's seen
Yeah,
it all, hasn't he?
yeah.
So when you're around these, mate, what type of like environment and attitude are you picking up on? Are you picking a bit of everyone else and starting to forge your stage after playing without knowing? Do you think maybe?
I was. I don't think I became my own person until I went to South Africa to play there.
Right.
I was probably too intimidated, and I hadn't played all these. I don't know if about yourself, but you get to these. Someone like getting to Saracens, they were pretty much all good boys, all really really good guys. Really enjoyed a lot of them, and some I'm still in touch with now. And which that doesn't always happen in rugby. I think just because you play together doesn't mean you're mates. But most of them I've stayed in touch with, and they're good guys, and I'm really happy to bump into them. Um, but I probably wasn't myself for years, because you're just trying to find your feet in a different environment. A lot of the guys have either played for a few years together at the club, or they've played for countries together. Um, and I wasn't playing, and I think it's quite hard if you're not playing to in some of those situations. It's quite hard to maybe feel comfortable in your own skin in an environment because especially I just was like, I can't speak much. I don't want to be speak out of turn. I haven't earned the right to speak much here yet. Um,
Yeah, I get that. Yeah,
yeah, and so I wasn't. In some respects, I came out of my shell a couple of times, but not many. But it wasn't until shortly after that I dropped down a division. I played for Henley, which was a good experience, and I went to work, got a job, and was doing that part time. But that was I wanted to still go full time, and then I had the opportunity to go to South Africa to get some game time because I hadn't played much, and then on the back of that, come back hopefully into the Premiership. And through Alan Zonda, my coach at Saracens, I'd gone out to play some club rugby in South Africa. And whilst there, I played, and I was playing a lot of rugby then. Um, I then got offered a contract at one of the smaller provinces called the Leopards, and they were twinned with the club was the Puck, the PUK Puck, which is like an old university town, Potchefstroom, and they've got a club called the Potchefstroom University, and I played for them whilst also playing for the Leopards. So that was probably the first time in a long time where I came into, I was playing regularly. I was, more confident. I played with all these internationals. I was able just to be myself. So it was a bit of a journey, I think.
that really satisfying though, mate.
What was it?
I bet it was like just being able just to relax and know you're gonna play. Because I imagine when you're playing sporadically, mate, like say you
Oh,
had an okay game, but in your eyes it wasn't the best.
yeah.
You can't look forward to fixing it, can you? Because you don't know when you're going to. I imagine that's what like a medical joker in the French league like.
Yeah, 100%. And the other thing, John, is that um, if you're on a 1 year contract, it was only when I got to that I had confidence in that the coach really rated me. I got to South Africa and I'm in this situation in Poch, um, and he gives me a decent contract for a proper length of time. And then he offered me,
Yeah,
a renewal and things like that. And then you have that vote of confidence and the guy rates you and you're not sort of
yeah,
second guessing each week, like, is he going to get rid of me and are they touting around for other players and um, all that type of stuff. And it's not that you don't take anything for granted. You don't suddenly get comfort necessarily, but because inherent in me is I want to fulfill my potential and work hard. But at the same time, I did have that experience that I've got a vote of confidence from the coach, and then I really benefited from that definitely.
I can really appreciate like when lads are signing 1 year deals. It must be twitchy
Yeah,
because how do you really commit to that? Where you live, what you're driving, um, certain trips to certain community clubs because you become attached to people outside the game, Ben, don't you? And then you're
yeah.
not around enough to see that relationship out or see it through, or it must be really hard. So I imagine a 2, 3, 4 year deal is really settling.
Yeah, and it's also like in professional rugby. I mean, it's changed now, but I remember the guys, we weren't getting contracted until much later on in the season. People get contracted earlier in the season now. But you're so like in the Northern Hemisphere in rugby union, people will start getting contracted in September and they'll be doing the recruitment this September for the following season to start. So people will start talking. So you can imagine you've just like maybe 2 weeks into the season and you don't know if you're going to get a contract for next year. So already people are they're talking, but you hear maybe they're looking for somebody else or something like that, and you're
Yeah,
thinking, well, actually, I have, or do I need to start looking now? And the season hasn't really got going in earnest. That's crazy, and that's you need to. But I'm sure a bit of that was maybe my own the way I looked at it, or insecurities maybe, but also a big element of it. I think when you're a good coach, you really empower the players and you give them confidence and you allow them to know where they stand and you really are open and transparent in your communication as well.
and imagine the best coaches that do that get the best version of the players that reciprocate that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, they're
Yeah,
comfortable. They've the family settled. They know where they're going to be for the next 2, 3 years. You know what it's like as well. I was still single then and young, But if I'd been also with a family and I had say a young family,
exactly. Yeah,
they want to know that they can put down roots. I know that if they're happy, then I can concentrate on what I'm doing. I don't have to think about, oh yeah, but he's not happy at school, or she's
yeah.
not happy there, and you're not getting distracted by any of that. You can focus on the main thing.
Yeah.
Um, so that's huge as well.
So how was the rugby at the Leopards, mate? And so would you have not been eligible for Curry Cup, mate? Because it used to be really big, didn't it? I imagine it still is big, but it used to be on Sky and stuff, didn't it?
Yeah, yeah, no, I played in that. Yeah, so the Leopards
Yeah,
played in the Curry Cup, and we played in the Vodacom
right.
Cup. So we played Super
Yeah,
when Super Rugby was on. So you can imagine pre-season starts the end of the year, end of like November time, and then you have a break for Christmas, and everybody goes to the beach because it's the middle of the summer, and then you come back first week of January, and you're trying to get back in. The ground is really hard, and you're running again, and you're getting going, and then around February time Super Rugby starts, and you play the tier below in South Africa at the time. All the provincial players that weren't in the Super Rugby squads would play Vodacom Cup, and you'd play against the Cheetahs or the Sharks or whatever. But you'd play Vodacom Cup level, which is the level below. But then at any stage, you could get drafted into the Super Rugby teams. And the Sharks fed into the Sharks Super Rugby team. But
yeah,
so as the Leopards, we fed into there were different teams you could go to. You could go to the Bulls. So some of my teammates fed into the Bulls, and a couple played for the Bulls. A couple of them played for before that the Cats, which was
yeah,
some guys from Free State, from the Cheetahs, and
yeah.
from the Lions. So
Right.
yeah, it was an
You
amazing
would give
experience playing that.
preference there. Sorry to interrupt you, Ben. So say them three provinces maybe wanted the same two, three, four players. Who do you are you aware of who would have got priority?
Yeah, you fed in. They just changed. They rerouted it. So when I was there, I think we fed into the Bulls, although geographically the Bulls were the other side of the Lions. So the Lions actually Poch. If you drive through Joburg, you get to Pretoria, which is where the Bulls are. But at the time, the Bulls, I think we fed into the Bulls. The Pumas fed into the Bulls, and then and yeah, I think it was just maybe us two, and then the Bulls, and then the Lions were. Um, the Cheetahs and the Free State teams, Northern Free State as well, and the Lions themselves. So yeah, they just rerouted it. So you'd had a clear idea of but obviously if someone wants to draft you or pick you and you're the
Yeah.
next best player, it's quite a good system. It was a good system like that. If you're ripping up trees playing for the Leopards and Western Province down in Cape Town, they wanted the Stormers needed a player. In theory, you could have been, they could offer you a contract.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
I like that. Oh, that's good. And you shouldn't be blocked off, should you? You shouldn't have to
Yeah.
deviate to another Vodacom Cup team to have to play for the Western Province or
Yeah, yeah, and also the
yeah,
other really good thing about that was you had minimal contracts and central contracting. So there would be like if you're not central contracting, so you weren't contracted by the South African Rugby Union, but you would be like if I was playing for the Vodacom Cup, your wage band is here.
yeah,
And then if you play Super Rugby, so say then I played well and I'm drafted in Super Rugby, straight away my minimum contract has to be here, like this amount a month. And it would be
yeah.
this is the minimum for a Super Rugby player if you're starting out, and then this is
Oh,
and
like the
so
NRL that now, isn't it?
yeah, it was really
Yeah,
really good. It was really really good, and I thought there was a lot of merit in what happened there, and a lot of players got exposure and they got opportunities at different teams that they wouldn't necessarily have otherwise. And it allowed players like Western Province, which is Cape Town. Stellenbosch University is an incredible breeding ground for amazing players. People like Bob Skinstad have come through there, and all these other Percy Montgomery, Brayton Paulser, all these legends, and then even modern players now. And so they've got loads of players. But if some of them want to get game time, so I remember Scott Brits, the hooker, he was at the province, wasn't really playing. He got picked up by the Lions for a bit, and then it was only later then he came back because then he got that opportunity to go and play there, and then so at least that way you're getting all your best players across the country getting game time.
yeah, playing to a good level as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Did that game suit you, mate? And did you really like enjoy and thrive
yeah,
in that type of style of play?
yeah. 100%. I loved it. It's probably the
Yeah,
best I ever played, and most enjoyable, best I played, happiest. All those types of things. Probably they don't. There's not all coincidence. Um, I was the smallest guy on the field. I was always pretty small anyway, but going there to South Africa, the scrum halves were bigger than me, like, and it's just like, it's quite funny. So it was good, but you knew your job, and they really appreciated you for doing your job. Similar sort of thing. I think a lot of it is you just trying to earn respect. Africa, it was a real Afrikaans heartland where I was in Poch. So when I got there was only two English speaking people as their first language, me and another guy, but he was from East London, in South Africa, East London, South Africa, which is on the coast not far from
Yeah,
Port Elizabeth. And so we were like first language English. So it was a big adaptation. But it was good. And it was probably the first place I'd gone to where it was a bit of a merger of me learning, but also me being able to bring stuff. Especially, we'd done a lot more defense training in the UK. So with Saracens, I'd done a lot more defense type stuff and an awareness of, and so I was able to not be a player coach, but I was like a senior player in that team, helping shape. And I'd meet the coach every day, and we'd I go through and discuss stuff and have ideas, and he would be bouncing stuff off me. And what do you think there? What would he be doing? What's that coach do? How does that?
yeah.
So that was probably the first time that really happened for me as a player.
How old was you there? Because you're still young, aren't you?
Yeah, I was 25, I think. Yeah, around
That's
25.
young to get that type of range, isn't it?
Yeah, it was cool
Especially
actually.
not in your home country as well, Ben. Sorry, mate, to interrupt you.
Yeah, yeah, you're 100% right. And I learned a lot, and it was hard, and I'd sort of, um, it was huge depth, really competitive, like, and um, some very, very good players, and they'd come straight from school, some of them, and they've gone on to play. Like, so in the back row, I played with a guy called Franco van der Merwe. He went on to play for the Springboks a couple of times, played for the Lions, had a stint at London Irish, did really well. But he was the seven and I was the six back over there. The open side plays six, so I was playing
Yeah,
six, and so that was you'd learn a lot, but at the same time I did have those reins. It was incredible. It's a great experience. He actually
yeah,
wanted me to become part of the coaching team like the year afterwards, or 2 years later. So I played 2 years, and then he wanted me to become the coach, to join him as one of the coaches and do the analysis, and yeah, that would have been great. But I just wanted to play still, because I was still something
yeah.
like
It's
20,
young, isn't it?
26 or something. Yeah, but I
Yeah,
was just it was okay, it was a bit of a compliment, I guess.
yeah. And give your thoughts of like post rugby. Then did it? So a little bit of a drip feed of what you could lead into.
Yeah, I'd
Yeah,
always loved coaching from and like
right.
when I'd been at school, and even like when I reflect back on some of this, and as you do down the years as a coach, I think, okay, when did the coaching thing when did I was always coaching everywhere I went, and because I was a really average player, I'd always had to analyze the game, and like we spoke about earlier, I wasn't quick and all these different things, so I'd always had to understand the game. And I could never understand when people say, "Oh, this is the way we do it because this is the way we do it," and I'd be like, "Well, there's
Yeah,
another way." And I remember playing a sevens tournament at school, and I said to the coach, "Well, why don't we? It's seven aside. Why don't we, as the backs, why don't we all line up vertically just behind the scrum? If we have a midfield scrum, like, I would hate to have to defend that if we just like almost like a NFL I formation, having the 9, 10, etc., having
right.
four backs just vertically in a line, and we just all go into one side. It's really difficult to defend. How do you defend that?
Yeah,
And I remember having those sort of ideas and saying that to the teacher, and it'd be like, well, you don't. You just do. Everybody lines up like this, and that's why we're going to do it. So I would
yeah,
always like that as a player. And then I did have that sort of, getting those coaching opportunities. But while I was in South Africa, I was coaching as well. I coached schools. When I first got there, I coached a school at under 8 level, and then when I got to Poch, I was coaching a hostel, which was actually funny. And Rassi Erasmus visited Potchefstroom University the other day because he's got a doctorate from Northwest
yeah.
University, which is Poch now, Puck. And so I was coaching a hostel. I was coaching another team, and so I was always coaching. Yeah, wherever I went.
So the one thing we've noticed there is you don't mind the age or the standard. So it's all well and good being able to see a game, Ben, but it's articulating it to them specific groups, isn't it? That's a talent in itself.
Yeah, you're always learning, aren't you? And so, like, it
Yeah.
was when I was coaching the under eights, the biggest thing is funny because when I first went to South Africa, I was in Cape Town, and the guy that I was coaching with, we ended up becoming, very good mates, and it was his first coaching opportunity. We were coaching the under eights at this school, and the hardest part was probably us having to manage the parents. And so you're learning all these different
Yeah.
things, because they all expected to. And that guy now is a guy called Dave Vessels. I don't know what his proper title is, but he's the head of Springbok Rugby, basically. Um,
Right.
yeah, Dave went on to coach the Melbourne Rebels. He coached the Western Force. He was his defence coach at the Brumbies in Australia. Then he came back and he was the Stormers director of rugby, and now he works with with SA Rugby. And so, but yeah, so we laugh about it because the parents were probably the hardest thing, and they used to give us so much grief. And now, when we reflect, we caught up not long ago, but if some of those parents could see, say, what he's done in his coaching journey now and the grief they used to give us, it would be quite a funny conversation. Yeah, yeah,
So when the Leopards come to an end, mate, I imagine it's amicable because of relationship you've had. But what's the next step for you?
yeah. I mean, I wanted to come, and I loved it. It was an incredible experience, and in hindsight, I probably should have stayed there.
Hindsight's wonderful, mate, isn't it?
Yeah, maybe, but maybe not. I should have stayed there. But why I say that is because it was going really well. When I got to Wasps actually later on, we used to have a saying: "It's better to be appreciated than tolerated," And
Yeah.
some environments you go to and you're making up the numbers. And at the Leopards, I was, it was an incredible environment, and it was an incredible lifestyle as well. But it probably had a shelf life because we were all mostly just young and single, and we'd hang out with each other a lot during the week. And because it was a small town, we'd barbecue or braai, as they call it in South Africa, we'd braai 2 or 3 times a week at someone else's house. And it was just that type of lifestyle, very easy, 10-minute journey home, see you, tomorrow morning, good weather. And then you're playing most games because the size of South Africa, you're playing away, and you go to Pretoria and you're playing at Loftus Versfeld where the Lions played, and this historic stadium, and you're playing against the Bulls there. And then you're going down to the coast and you're playing in Cape Town, or then you're playing in East London or in Port Elizabeth, and then you're flying back, and you'd go on a Thursday and come back on a Sunday morning or something like that. And that was easy when you're by yourself and stuff like that. So that was an
Yeah.
incredible experience, and played in some amazing places against some good players. Playing at Ellis Park in Johannesburg, and it's where they had the '95 World Cup final, and
Yeah.
they have each part of the changing room is numbered. You have your own sort of, like, they have these old wooden like types of lockers, and all these amazing experiences. But that was incredible. So when you reflect back, it was like, wow, it's a bit of a pinch yourself type thing. But I wanted to come back, and I had the opportunity to play a bit of sevens, um, and so I had to come back and get into that sort of sevens thing, and there was an opportunity, and I joined the England Sevens squad in November 2005, and went to Dubai and played in the B team shortly afterwards. So that was an incredible experience, and it was at a time when the sevens program with the RFU was taken seriously. They invested into it, and so we had some really really good players, and it was a pathway for those guys before they played for the full test side. So that
Change,
was
yeah.
yeah, so that was the lure to come back really and sort of try and make it at home, and that was still burning inside me to try and get into the Premiership and really prove it here.
Right. So a couple of things, mate. When you went Dubai, I've no doubt it was very different to that Dubai when you were living there. Secondly, how difficult is it adapting from 15 to sevens? And what are the
Yeah,
main intricacies that you have to adjust to?
it's a good question because I didn't know how to play sevens at all,
Yeah.
and it was really funny. One of the best guys that helped me
Considering
a
you were
lot.
slow, you've done all right, haven't you? They're your words,
Yeah,
by the way. I'm in reverse, so I
yeah,
can say
yeah. No, no, no. You're right. You're right. And but then I had to, like, so you learn and you become like I said before a couple of times. You have to break down the game and you work out what you're good at, and you work out how to put yourself in situations where you do what you're good at, and don't put yourself in situations where you're exposed. And and so, like in sevens, I knew that basically my job anyway, because I was a forward, was to be one of those three guys in the defensive line. And at any time, the attack almost takes care of itself. And I'd
Yeah.
have a really like a role in the attack, and that was basic. But I was a link player, I was a support player, I was doing working basically. But in defence, if you've got a flat line, you want to be one of those middle guys, like in rugby league. You want to be one of the forwards in the middle, and you want to be connecting really well with the guy either side of you, staying as square as possible. The situation I didn't want to give to anybody was one on one, me directly opposite them, with them having a 10-15 meter gap between us where they could, and then either side of me more than a 7 meter gap. Because, so what I would have to do always, and sevens lends itself to this once you know what you're doing, and the system we learn does as well. You get in one of those middle, you're one of those middle three defenders, and you're never directly opposite somebody. You're always putting them at least a shoulder width one side of you. So I'm aligned to the side of them so that I'm dictating to them and I'm showing them one way. And if they step off that outside foot back towards me, then I can deal with that threat. But then I'm staying connected. I'm never getting too far ahead or too far behind the guy either side of me. So and then we move almost like a windscreen wiper there, and we do the other, and when we go up together, and it was learning how to not be exposed. And if I suddenly found myself second from the end or something like that, I would pretty much want to get back in. And because my engine was always good, I was able to run. I was always fit, and I loved my training. I was able to provide that hard work in the inside, one of those inside three people. But it was an adjustment. When I first adjusted to it, it was a steep learning curve. Henry Paul actually was in that squad, and he was one of the most helpful guys. He just took me aside day one. I still remember it. It's funny what you do remember, isn't it? But I still remember him in the hotel on the training field and just grabbing me, helping me, doing doing extras, explaining stuff to me. Um, he was super, super helpful.
And then when you're traveling the world, which is was because it, like you said, the circuit was really, really serious, and it was always on the telly, mate, wasn't it? Uh, You're used to that, aren't you? You've done it since a kid, but it's how do you build the relationships on the road?
Yeah, I didn't do it much because what happened was I went to Dubai and I played in that B team, and the B team was crazy. The B team, we had Dan
Yeah,
Luger won a World Cup. We had Nick Bendon on, who played for Bath and Claremont and played for England. We had Dave Strettle, who played on the wing for England. We had Tom Croft, who played for the British and Irish Lions. We had Chris Cracknell, who played 35, 40 times in tournaments for England in sevens. And then in the A team, they had Foden, they had Matthew Tate, they had all these really, really good players. Henry. Um, so the travel thing, I actually got MRSA. I got the superbug MRSA, and I was due to sign for Wasps after that tournament anyway. And I went through, and then I found basically they didn't find the MRSA in my leg until the first week of February, the following, a couple of months later, because I've been really ill. And basically that was beginning of the end of my playing. I went through to Wasps as a player in June that year, then the off season, but they had to cut my leg open and take the stuff out again. I was set back. I was out for about, I don't know, maybe 15 months or something like that. Um,
yeah,
yeah, so it was a challenge time. So I didn't really have to do the adjusting to the traveling on the road thing. I think I would have been
right.
okay at that because I was
I
sort of
think it would
used
have
to.
been, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. But it was just a different environment. And then trying to rehab again as almost like a spare part at Wasps, having um, basically not knowing if I was going to be able to play again. MRSA, nobody really had dealt with it before in a professional rugby player that I could find anyway. And so it was this situation of not knowing. I lost 12 kilos, and I was never a big guy, but in lean muscle mass, I lost a lot of weight. Um, I was really sick, and then trying to adapt to a new environment at Wasps was really difficult. And it was good. I mean, I was around people like Sean Edwards and all these other legends, but it was an amazing
yeah.
experience. But it was tough, yeah.
So, do you know when you've worked so hard for that opportunity, Ben, which you have, and you've travelled for it, and you've bided your time, mate. You've not caused no issues anywhere, and then when you get there, something like this comes along and rips the
Mm,
rug from under your feet. How do you cope with that, mate? Because players talk about the dark days in rehab, don't they?
yeah. Um, I didn't. I didn't think of. I probably think of it now more because at the time, the nature of the competitor is you're like, oh, this is just another thing I've got to deal with. Everybody has to deal with stuff. This is just my version of whatever it is, like a knee blowout, or just didn't think. But it's only when you realize that was the beginning of the end. Now reflecting on it, that you go, oh yeah, it wasn't. The hard part was, if I'm being really honest about it, the hard part was the financial element of it and things like that. Because by the time this stage, you're not a kid, you've got overheads, you've been playing professionally, you've got a mortgage, you're either married or just married, you've got like, so suddenly you're thinking, and then you're getting the conversations with the oh, basically you need to prove yourself and you need to play, and I'm like, well, I need to get a job, I need to pay the bills, and then so the pressure's different, and then people say, well, if you this is what we will offer you as a contract if you're okay, and it's basically, well, we can sign that kid and we can give him basically kit and a really almost minimum wage and he's going to be happy, and and you're like, well, jeepers, I've got to make some decisions here that are really hard. Do I carry on pushing on and being a bit selfish on this journey now? I've got a family or kids or a wife or whatever it is, and you're thinking, I'm not getting any younger. Plus, I was thinking, if I start a new career now, I'm going to be at the bottom of a new ladder. Like, I'm going to have to go and get a job. Like, how am I going to do that? Because, I'm earning and then you're thinking, okay, well, yeah, I'm going to get offered a contract. Someone wants me. Wasps are the best team in the country. They're European champions. The team won the European Cup that year. So someone will offer me a contract. But what does that mean? Oh, it means you have to go and move to Coventry or something like that, and you're thinking, well, how's that going to work? I've just bought of this. My wife's teaching here or working here. And so that was more of the pressure. Around that, as well as they're not knowing if you're going to fully recover. That it was a different type of pressure.
No, but it was scary, mate.
Yeah, with the leg thing, it was really scary. Yeah, I was really sick, so I lost a little weight, and again, you do sort of brush it off. Like I was having these sweats, and it's crazy when you think back on it. I went for a run. I tried to I was sweat it out. I was just come back from Dubai. I've caught a bug. I was like, oh, I'm going to be fine. I'll take some antibiotics. I'll go for, and I should be fine by now. So I'm going to go for a run. And I remember going for a run and doing, and yeah, feeling like death, and getting back and then freezing. It wasn't a cold day, but I was freezing. I had like 3 blankets on me. I had 2 pairs of socks. I was just shivering. But then you convince yourself, oh, you just really, you just, I don't know, you're getting soft or something like that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it was only when other people came along like, are you crazy? Go for blood tests, go and get this. And then it's only when that happened then it became a bit more reality. And I went for these blood tests. They admitted me to hospital straight away. And then I was on an IV for 10 days or 7 to 10 days or whatever it was. And and they were like, okay, well, this is quite serious.
That's me in it. Because like literally just like that, your life's completely changed.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and it was frustrating because at Wasps, thinking as a player, there's guys there, they're an amazing team, amazing players, but I never was able to give a good account of myself there. So you're
Yeah.
trying to be a good teammate, you're trying to be a good trainer, you're trying to, I was rehabbing really hard, but the guys, you don't really know, they don't know you. Most of my body of work had been done overseas, so they don't really know who you are. Um, and so you're like, who's this guy? He's just here training, and that's how it felt. Yeah, so it was difficult, mate. It was challenging.
It was. So what come next, mate?
Which do the funny thing there was Sean Edwards was like he's been one of the biggest influences in a funny way because Sean I don't know really super well, but he was really he's Sean is a guy I looked up to as a player when he was a player. I love watching that Wigan team, and I used to watch a lot of that. I was influenced more by rugby league when I was younger, because rugby union wasn't on the TV. So when I was at school, Saturday afternoons, listening to Ray French, watching that Wigan team, that Saints team, that Cass team, you know, all those Wigan boys, and then yeah, Widnes as well. And yeah, Bradford Northern and all these, So I was hugely influenced by that. So having Sean as a coach and someone who is around at Wasps. I'd see every morning when I was doing my rehab and trying to come back. He was always really caring, and he's got what people don't realize about Sean. His emotional intelligence, or whatever you want to call it, is off the charts. He's a really caring person. He's not only an intense guy, great coach, but very, very clever, and he cares about people, and that's authentic. And so that was a really big takeaway for me at that time, from especially later in my coaching journey. And he's a guy that, yeah, I've got a lot of time for.
I think his relationship with Danny epitomises that because Danny's life has played out and pressures he's been under since being the golden boy of rugby and stuff. They still hold
Yeah,
each other accountable and still in touch, aren't they? And things like that. They're really close.
yeah. Sean's so humble as well. I bumped into him a few years ago because I was coaching his son. I went back to coach at Wasps, so I coached at the academy for 3 years, and I was coaching his son, James. Lovely, lovely guy, really smart kid. I say kid. Oh, you always do that, don't you? And then he's like probably like nearly 30 now or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. But really good guy. And I'd bump into Sean, and Sean would suddenly talk about something, and I asked him about Wayne Bennett one day, and I see his eyes light up, and he went, "Oh, when I first went coaching, I took myself off to Australia. It was amazing. Wayne let me spend time with him, and it was he's so humble that you like. It's so funny that he's talking it like that he's really privileged to be able to spend time with Wayne Bennett and all this type of stuff. And it just gave a really big insight into who Sean is and his character and what he's like. But he's a continual learner as well. Very, very humble, but that growth mindset.
Oh, yeah, he does come across that character, mate. Like every team he's touched, you can see the improvement he makes there, can't you?
Yeah, I think I was fortunate enough to get to know Dennis Betts in the last couple of years. I swam the channel with as part of a relay team, and it was a rugby union versus rugby league swim, and we had a bit of a race in inverted commas, but we was honestly just trying to get across. But Dennis was one of the guys in the rugby league team, and we all trained together. We did stuff together, but and it was for an organisation called Head for Change, who were doing brilliant work in this space, and I got to know Dennis, but Dennis and Sean and Andy Farrell and who am I forgetting about? Some of the others that were in that Wigan era, they've all gone on
Right,
to be.
Mick Cass. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I think even Mike Forshaw as well. Actually, he's coaching, isn't he?
Right.
Obviously, with defence
Yeah,
coach. A lot of them have done incredible work as coaches, and I think with what Sean, I think it's 55 medals, trophies that he's won across leagues, codes, and as a player and coach. Dennis is on something not that far behind that, Um, very incredible coach as well, and so yeah, I learned a lot from those guys. But incredible people.
he's done really well at Widnes. It's probably once he left after getting grief for you, mate, that Widnes fans realised well, how good a job he was doing, really.
It's often the way, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, you've got to be careful what you wish for sometimes, Ben, and yeah,
Yeah, you see that in
yeah,
football, don't you? Yeah, you see it
yeah,
in football a lot,
yeah,
don't you?
yeah.
But yeah, I was with Dennis in Manchester a couple of years ago, and he's just quietly there, and this Widnes fan saw him and just came up to him, and it was just you'd forget sort of sometimes because Dennis is just such a humble guy that um, what he has done and achieved. But this Widnes fan couldn't be more sort of complimentary and just loved Dennis. Just thanked him for everything he'd done for the club and the town, and you realize it's really powerful. But it was really a good reminder of how you can impact people's lives positively through sport and through rugby um, and caring as well. Just being authentic and caring, genuinely caring. And I think he's doing a great job with the women at Wigan now.
No, they're definitely progressing, mate. He is making an impact there. And thankfully that Widnes fan was nice because you might not have come on.
Yeah. No, well, you have to be a brave man to tell Dennis, like if you're not happy, I suppose.
So did coaching really start taking off after that injury, mate? And you went back to London Scottish, didn't you?
Yeah, I went back to London Scottish. There was an opportunity to sort of be a player coach. The playing sort of quickly faded away, to be honest with you, because it was like what we were saying earlier about always pushing myself to a harder environment. that was the opposite, having gone from Wasps to London Scottish, who were then in National 2 or something like that, and they were at a different stage in their journey, all amateur. It was quite hard to go from being around this environment where you had, Rafi Benez, Simon Shaw, Phil Vickery, Lawrence Delalio, Josh Lucy, Alex King, Tom Voice, who sadly passed away recently. All these other guys who were even the quiet ones, who like Van Gisbergen, all very confident, driven. Joe Worsley as well, really determined individuals, very resilient individuals, very ambitious individuals in their own way. To go from that to then playing, it was like going playing a different sport to go play for London Scottish, and I was never like playing just for the beers or whatever like that. I was always quite competitive and wanted to fulfill my potential, and so the coaching quickly took over and was more enjoyable for me than playing at that level. If it had been on the way up, I would have loved it probably, but at that stage, my body was a bit broken, and there was a lot to gain from the coaching, and I was loving that.
Yeah. So, is it difficult when you're on the amateur? Because you mentioned it was just still amateur, didn't you, Ben? So when
Yeah.
like half the team are only turning up and things, it's like a
Oh
realistic
yeah.
view of how most rugby clubs are, isn't it?
Yeah, you see that with coaches who've just come from. I've seen that a lot. I've seen that a lot in the last how many years, where you got guys who've been professional players and then they go and coach. It's like a different sport. You have to completely adjust your mindset. Your expectations change. They change completely. People are like, well, I'm working. I'm stuck, and my focus
Yeah.
is to get on this career path and do really well in my workspace so that I can do this, and this, and provide for my family. This is just a bit of fun at the weekend. So of course I'm not, if there's a choice and I can't make training, then deciding which one's going to give, it's just obvious. And you
Yeah.
see so many coaches struggle with that, to deal with that. Well, and in both in terms of dealing with the people, but then how do you make a team work? Like
Yeah.
12 people come training, and it's never the same 12 or something like that. It's
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
You're
challenging, and
bragging getting 12.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, I've had some. Yeah, you have some challenging ones, but
Yeah.
yeah, it was a different process for me. It was really, but it was good because I was coaching at the same time. I was coaching with the SRU on their pathway with their XLs. I was coaching with a guy called Rolly Williams who'd been helping the SRU, but he'd been at Wasps when I was there. He'd coached a lot of other people. Um, and again, it was just another. I was fortunate, and when I reflect back, and I've played with I was with Ian McGeechan. So Ian McGeechan Geach was at Wasps, and so I learned from him. I learned from Sean Edwards. I learned from Alan Zonder. I picked up stuff from all these different people, and then the guys that I've coached with, like John Mitchell and Dave Vessels, who's now the head of the Springboks, and all these other guys, and then more recently with people like Villepre, Pierre Villepre in France, and Hugo Moller. I've learned so much. That's been like for me. I've just moved that sort of growth mindset that I had as a player into the coaching, and I was always doing that to try and fulfill my potential as a player. Anyway, looking for ways I could recover better, eat better, train better, train smarter, whatever it would be, understand the game better. But yeah, that sort of quickly shifted into me as a coach.
Yeah. And then
But
you
one
head to
thing
the
I
boat,
forgot.
mate. Go on, sorry.
Yeah, well, actually, I forgot to mention, like before when I left, Henry Paul, HP and I were good mates, so are good mates, I should say. And and he'd said to me, look, if ever when we played sevens together, he said, look, if ever you want to give league a crack, let me know, because I'd just asked him loads of questions about rugby league because I'd
Yeah.
love rugby league. Like I said to you, like a Wigan team that he was in, and Sean was in, and Andy Farrell, and Simon Horton, Gary Connolly, Jason Robinson, Martin O'Fire, Mick Cassidy, Kelvin Skerritt, all those guys. Like I grew up watching that because we didn't have access to watching Union. So that's the first team I really followed. Um, and so I was always, and then when I played in New Zealand, the Winfield Cup was on, and so people like Dennis had joined the Auckland Warriors, and you had Dennis Betts, and you had Tira Party, you had Stacey Jones, you had Gene Namu, you had all those types of guys, Andy Platt playing, and then I was watching the NRL the whole time. That was a big influence
Yeah.
on me as well. And so when I played sevens, and I played with HP, like I just always picking his brain about league, and he'd said to me, look, if ever by this stage I wasn't young, but he said, look, if ever you want to give it a crack in league, let me know. And there was an opportunity that came up, and it involved moving up north, and it was at the time we just settled down, and it wasn't the right thing. But then he said, look, why don't you come through to London Broncos, London Harlequins? I'm just signing there. So I went down and I met Brian McDermott, and I ended up staying there for about 3 or 4 months, and I played a few games in the reserves. So that was a great experience. But I wish I'd gone to league a bit earlier, and tried it and given it a crack a bit earlier, and also not, I was playing either, I'm not a big guy, but I was playing in the second row or in the front row. I was playing as a prop,
Yeah.
and I'd love to have played in a different position where I could have actually played the ball a bit more. And
Yeah.
as when we were quite structured in how we were playing. But I went there before London Scottish, but that again was an incredible experience for me, and it was really good to train in that environment. And at the time, there were some good boys playing down there at the Broncos stroke Harlequins. I think we were Harlequins at that stage.
So how did you get get to grips with the coaching techniques and that? Had he pretty much, because it is a different game, mate, isn't it? The intricacies are very different, and the way people go about systems and that is different, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the play the ball is different. I think, I was practicing that loads. I think I probably didn't adjust very well, for a couple of reasons. I think if I'd just done what I could do and then just refine that slightly, then that would have been a better way of me trying to be a league player. But at that
Yeah.
stage, I was trying to force myself into this is what a league player should look like, and that
Yeah.
probably that didn't suit me. Um, but in terms of the defensive stuff, I'd become a really good defender from the sevens, and I was a really good talker in that middle place, and I could, talk the guy at the lead runner, the back runner. I'd be able to talk. I've got your inside shoulder push one, but I was a really good talker as a defender. Um, and so I think that's what Henry had probably seen as well, that I could probably make that transfer quite quickly from a defensive point of view.
Yeah.
And so that was good. Yeah, I was able to do that. And um, yeah, but the rest of it, just the intricacies of how you would play and why you would do stuff, it's really different. The carries are different and also the tackling. You can concede the gain line in league, because if I hit and stick and I hold you and you fight and you make a couple of more meters, but then you ultimately I've slowed you down and then I've put you on your back and then you've lost the
Yeah,
wrestle.
turtled them in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter that I've conceded 5 meters, some necessarily. But then you're kicking and we're going to get the ball back, or you haven't got out of your half, and or you can't complete your set or whatever it is. Um, Whereas in union it was so different. You're thinking this gain line is everything. I can't let them cross this gain line, so I might have to chop low. And obviously that's there's not much low chopping in league.
Oh,
You're hitting and sticking, and you're much more upright. And so that was interesting. That was probably one of the big difficulties or big challenges.
imagine one of your issues would have been, because I know I blagged my way into the back row, mate, when I went playing for the Wits somehow, but and I went back playing for Alton Hornets in the front row and sometimes second row, a bit like you, but like in the back row, mate, you follow every kick back.
Yeah,
So yeah, and you try and act, if you can't be a shield, you're probably under the kick if a winger's chased. And then in
yeah.
rugby league, you've probably worked back and looking round, and half your pack are still hands on knees, aren't they? That's the one thing I found a bit bizarre when I was flicking back into as I got older.
Yeah, yeah, it was really interesting. I mean, I don't think, funny enough, I don't think people realised in this country how good Henry Poole was as a player. I don't know if you remember him much as a player, but he
I
went back
remember him,
in.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he was incredible, like playing standoff or wherever he played. He didn't get a good crack in rugby union in 15s. He was unreal at sevens. And then when he went back to play Brian Mack, who he'd known, they'd been at Bradford together, and
Yeah,
and so they'd been teammates. And Brian Mack was like, okay, well, he ended up playing loose forward most of the time,
right.
and so he'd make 40 tackles a game or whatever it is, and you'd just be like, but he'd play a completely different role. He wouldn't be that playmaker necessarily, but he would be, because they had what's his name, Chad was playing, and Scott Hill was playing at standoff, and you had different types of guys, so he would play just a different role for the team. Um,
Right. Still
Unreal.
connecting now at 13, aren't you? So you're more
Yeah,
like a first receiver, probably letting your half play a bit wider.
yeah, and he could do everything, that guy. So like he was, yeah. So that was it was a good learning curve for me, good experience.
It was, mate. I bet it was. So you did go to the Bulls, mate, didn't you? In a coaching capacity.
Yeah. So basically, I worked I worked coach with England with Ben Ryan and his group of coaches, and I was the analyst and doing some skill stuff and all that type of stuff. I coached for 3 years at London Scottish in the academy there with that pathway. I coached at Wasps then for 3 years. And
Mhm.
then and then basically with the transition and the academy and lots of different people, and then I basically started consulting because a couple of things happened. Um, I wanted more stability, and wanted a change, and I also wanted to just do something different in rugby. Rugby really union had really for me hit a bit of like a crossroads. We were just copying a lot of what everybody else is doing. Too much direct like attrition, not enough innovation. The S&C had dominated the progress. And so I went and found a guy called Pierre Villepro in France, and he's the father of that, one of the fathers of that French way of playing rugby, you know. And I wanted to learn how to attack, what the other ways of playing were. And I thought before going to see Pierre that I would get a bit of Wayne Bennett, a bit of Wayne Smith, a bit of Pierre Villepro, and put it all together and be a genius. And and so I came back and I started coaching at Oxford University with their under 21s with a guy called Lynn Evans who had been helping me, and started learning how to do the Villepro way of coaching, which is how Stade Toulousain, the French team, who are the best team in Europe, how they
Yeah.
coach, how they still coach, because that's been passed down through the generations and they still train that way. And they've integrated some modern way of, with some of the shape and structure, but there's still an ability to beat a man, to have a duel, a one-on-one, to understand where space is, how to create space, how to manipulate space, not just use, say, shape that we've adopted from rugby league, and how to get to an edge. Um, and so that was a real process for me to go find Pierre. And so I started consulting using that sort of way of. It took me about a year and a half to understand it. At first, as I said, I thought I'd just add it on, and then I realized I had to add on everything else onto what he had told me, because I suddenly understood the game that I hadn't really understood before. I understood the axis of attack, why people do certain things, how they do things, the stuff I spoke about just now about space. So that was an eye-opening experience for me. And then I started coaching and consulting that wherever I went. And so I went to the Bulls in 2018. I did a bit with the Argentinian coaches before that, to help them evolve their stuff into a more of a 15-man game, to use the ball a bit more. And then I had the opportunity to go and spend a bit of time with John Mitchell at the Bulls in 2018. And at the time, they had guys like Condre Pollard, the Springbok fly half, Jesse Creel, the
Yeah.
centre. Now, at the time, they hadn't won a World Cup. Now they've won two,
Yeah.
and RG Snyman and all these Lud Diaga and all these other incredible players, Trevor Niakani. And so that was an incredible experience. I wasn't there for very long, just as a consultant. And in my eyes, I wasn't doing much at all. I learned way more from Mitch, and he's such a
Yeah.
humble guy and such a good guy. But yeah, incredible experience. And on the back of that, what happened was we played against the Rebels, and I bumped into the Rebel staff post match, and I knew Dave Vessels, the guy I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
He was there now, the head coach of the Rebels, and he said, "What do
Mhm.
what sort of stuff are you doing?" And so, and then not long after that, the season ended, and then they reached out to me and they said, "Look, can you do some of that for us for next season?" And so that's how that came about as well. And I went
Mhm.
and did a similar sort of thing and sat down with the coaches. So there was a bit of a player piece and a bit of a coach piece, a bit of a coach education piece, looking at how we could implement different systems. And really, a lot of coaching, with coaches, I see that I think it's because of fear. There's a lot of copy and paste, as opposed to understanding what you want to do, creating a game model that suits your players, and actually understanding why you're doing certain things at certain times. Um, and then it becomes more authentic and actually a journey. And so that's the sort of stuff I've been coaching the last few years.
Right. And do you think that insight come away because you might have took half a step away from the field, seen a bit of more of an horizon and how things were done, and then step back in and again could
I
deliver
think
that?
I think I definitely got a different perspective from stepping away. Yeah, but
Yeah.
but but I'd already feel like I was always questioning stuff, or like like I gave that example at school with the sevens. Why don't we do this? I'd always
Yeah.
been questioning, and because I'd played in a bit in Australia, I'd played, I'd followed league, I'd played in New Zealand, I played in South Africa, I played, in Europe. The one place I hadn't really done any coaching or played was in France, or one of the places, maybe Argentina is the other at that stage, and so that was, but then at the same time, Toulouse are like the best team, and I'm thinking, why do they play that? It's not just like, people talk about it almost like an insult. Oh, jouer, the French just throw it around. They actually, it's a way of training that, and there's a way of playing it. It's not just random. They know somebody's going to
It's
be
not
there.
fluke. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's not fluke at all. Yeah,
yeah,
it's not fluke at all. You know someone's going to be there because your mindset is you're taught, and it's very simple. It's simplified, and you learn how to coach it. It's like, can I go forward? No, find support. And people understand the first principle of rugby union is go forward. It's
yeah,
written on the website. Go forward, find support, pressure, etc. And if you do that, then there's a way of working between that axis that goes through the guts, the middle of a team, and then to the edge, to the wide spaces, the wide axis. And there's a relationship between the two, and there's a flow. And you learn how to coach that, and you learn, So I'd been searching as well anyway, but it all sort of coincided. And so finding Pierre and learning more, and going and visit him and spending more time and coaching over there and coming back and forth, putting it into practice, seeing what works, what doesn't, going back, asking more questions. How can I integrate this in? Then, yeah, it was all a bit of it, like all these things, a journey.
yeah. And it's networking now at the elite level via email. You don't have to be ringing and writing letters, mate. But that's the growth we're talking about, not just in the game, but in your life as well. And it, Ben, it's
Yeah.
everything, mate. Because rugby doesn't define you, mate. That's what this is about.
Yeah.
Rugby's a part of
Yeah.
you, but it doesn't define you.
Yeah, and it's always the relationships you meet with these, like some amazing people as well. Like you meet Pierre Villepreux, and he's 80, or he's 75 back then, and he's just a lovely guy who's just willing to share and learn as well. And then you bump into the other coaches that he's influenced, like Ugo Moller, the head coach of Toulouse, and how he was coached by Pierre, and he's influenced by him now, and all these different things. And so, yeah, it doesn't define you. And also, I think the more you travel, the more perspective you get, because you meet a lot of people and you realize, you're pretty lucky and fortunate, and all those types of things, so you have gratitude for
Yeah,
what you have.
yeah. And then you go back to sevens, mate, don't you? And was it with Wales?
Oh, yeah, I did a bit of consulting for the Welsh Rugby
Yeah,
Union. Yeah, working on their pathways. I helped some of their coaches and coached their coaches around this type of stuff, some tactical periodization stuff as well, but integrating this so that this really fits into this tactical periodization model where people learn the four elements of. So when you coach the physical, the mental, the tactical, and technical all at the same time, that's sort of your ideal scenario in that tactical periodization model. And I'd been exposed to that when I was at Chelsea, because Mourinho uses that, a global approach to coaching. And so that dovetailed, and it's actually the way that Pierre Villepreux coaches. But it was never called that when he started in the 70s and 80s. But he's a clever guy. So I realized that they're basically interdependent, and they work together, and the same sort of thing. Jose called it guided discovery. He facilitates a session where you're doing all of those things, and you're basically equipping the player to be able to make a decision, use the right technique and skill to make the decision. You're then training the physiological element of that player, because you're creating constraints, so that then demands on them. And then also through that you're mentally taxing them and putting pressure and creating scenarios. So it was really, really interesting. And so the stuff I've been doing and coaching with the WRU and some of their coaches, guys like Mark Jones, who's at the Ospreys, who went out to play for coach the Crusaders in New Zealand, helped him with this type of stuff, and some other coaches as well. So yeah, and I've done that down the last few years. I went out to the Bulls earlier this season, helping them again, helping the under-21 coaches, helping those young players understand this way of doing things. Yeah, and a few other teams as well.
yeah. Right, mate. And you mentioned the head for change a little bit before. So the swim and the relay race, mate, who come out on top, and what was that camaraderie like? Was it like being back in a team environment again a
Yeah,
little bit?
That was amazing. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. It was incredible for me, for my mental health. It was really, really good because I was back in a team environment. I had the team focus. We were all training together, so we were all on the same. We're on still on the same WhatsApp group, and it just so happened that on the day they were in a different boat to us. Loads of I could talk for hours just about that experience. Took me way out of my comfort zone because I'm not like a big swimmer. It was incredible experience. I had to start actually first. So what happens is you get a 24-hour notice of when you're swimming. So they basically
the
saying,
tides and weathers
yeah,
and things. Yeah,
yeah. So they give you notice, and so they give you a window of a week, and then during that week they'll say to you, like, we're going to call you, so have your bag ready by the door, type thing. You got 24 hours. So I got a call, and they said you're on at 4 a.m. tomorrow morning, and in Dover. So we all, get down there, and you get there at 2 in the morning on the side of a dock, and the union guys and the league guys are in separate boats, and you head out, and what happens is you leave the port, and you go to the harbor, and you go to the right hand side, you go along, you're sailing parallel to the coast, and then it's pitch black, and you have to jump in. And then I went first, and Dennis Betts went first for the league boys. So then we both jump in, pitch black, just got a little like flashing light on my hat. And then you got to swim ashore, and we swam to this beach called Shakespeare Beach. There's got some steps. You swim there, you get out. You're buzzing at this stage. Get Dennis and I, gave each other a hug. Great to see him, So and then the hooter goes off at 4, and you're off. You're just diving into this pitch black. It's just crazy when I think about it. But it was an incredible experience. Just the team environment, but also having a goal to work towards again, setting, having the discipline of that, having that, wanting to be accountable to your teammates, not let them down. It was, yeah, just incredible.
like that, mate. And you've been doing your own podcast, mate, and yeah, with Gerthrow. So how did that come about? Whose idea was it, and how well do you bounce off each other, and what's it about as well, mate?
Yeah, so Guthrie and I started this podcast about 4 weeks ago called Lessons from the Game. Guthrow's a former World Cup winner. He won the World Cup in 2007 with South Africa. He coaches at La Rochelle in France. He used to play for Toulouse. And we met a few years ago, and we'd been talking about doing something like this, and then just at the beginning of the year we decided to do it. So yeah, as I said, it's called Lessons from the Game. We want to give people a platform to tell some stories and share and inspire as well by bringing some of those lessons that they've learned and either still use within the game or have taken outside the game. And so we've got a cross section of people that we've interviewed so far. Some are better known former players. So we had Anthony Watson on, the former British and Irish Lion and England player. We had Charlie Faumuina, the former All Black prop who played for Toulouse and won a World Cup. And we've had other people who've been in the workspace and have done really well because they've transitioned out of the game and been able to apply what they learned in the game. So it's been so far it's been really, really good. Really enjoying it. It's a great way of us sort of trying to give back, and that's really what we're trying to do. There are some stories, but it's not just about all the banter type stuff. It's actually how can we help young coaches, young players, etc.
It also gives them the understanding that there's life after rugby as well. Just because the game no longer is part of your life as a playing capacity, you can
Yeah,
still do well off the back of it, mate, can't you?
yeah, 100%. Yeah,
Yes.
definitely.
Right, mate. I've got a few daft questions for you.
Okay, go on.
So,
Put me on the spot.
any
Yeah.
pre-game superstitions?
Um, I think, yeah, I used to like running out the change room last, but that sort of when I got to South Africa, that changed because what they do in South Africa, I don't know if you've ever seen it, is you run out in your number order. So the captain goes first, and then they go out in number. So you'll go one,
Oh, I've
two, three,
never
four,
noticed
five,
that.
six. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
No.
yeah. So I don't know if they still do now with the Springboks, but you
Yeah.
always had to so you always just go out in order. So,
Oh,
well, then you're having to go out. I was going out as a six, so I would go out as a six. So that
yeah.
seemed, but also I just, I didn't really have that many type things. I find that if that be limiting me, in case you
Yeah.
can't get to do it, you got to, I don't know how people did some like, got to put this sock on last and all that type of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So the word that I'm about to use, mate, definition changes and varies for everybody. So the toughest player you played with and against.
Oh, um, yeah, it's a good question because tough. Yeah, there's a definition of tough, isn't there? Like some of the guys could take a lot of pressure, and they could take a lot of, you know, physical. They were tough over the ball, and they just would get smashed and then get back up and go again. That's that type of tough. I don't know if you remember a guy called Junior Paramore. Junior played rugby league for Cass, and but he played in the '95 Rugby Union World Cup for Samoa, and then he and Apollo Perellini signed rugby league here, and they both came over and played. And I played that year, the summer that I went through to play for Bedford and sign for Bedford and train with Bedford. I played a couple of warm up games with Junior, but training and playing with Junior, he is probably like I remember getting there and his biceps were like the size of my quads, like but he was just a serious guy as well and a
Yeah,
scary guy. And I remember once I went training, I'd taken a ball and I'd stolen a ball, and I wasn't either meant to do it or I'd made, hadn't he hadn't appreciated it, and he just looked at me, and he looked at me, and he was like, "Benny, don't do that again." And I was just, there was no referee to protect me, there were no
yeah,
cameras, it was just training. I was just like, it's probably the only time I thought it's really wise not for me to upset Junior. So I would say Junior Paramore. And if you can go and find the
yeah,
highlights of him, was a tough, tough, tough boy. There were quite a few others, and there's quite a few in South Africa, but you probably wouldn't know them, and they're
right,
not
yeah,
household names. There were a lot. There were two guys I have in mind in South Africa who were just hard boys, like come from mining towns and
yeah,
had grown up, in some tough environments. But Junior is a lovely guy, still a mate nowadays. Yeah,
yeah,
he's the kit man, the team manager at Bristol, and he's
okay,
just got the softest heart. But you just wouldn't. And his son's a really good player, Peter. But
right.
JP, yeah, you just wouldn't have wanted to cross his like you wouldn't want to upset him or cross his path.
At least you
No.
learn.
Yeah, yeah,
Right, mate. So your favourite away ground? And do
yeah.
you like the older style, mate, or do you like the new stuff?
Well, like I didn't play. I'm trying to think where I played in the UK that was like an amazing ground, but when I played in South Africa, it's probably the two stadiums that stand out for me there that I played and I was fortunate enough to play in a few times were Ellis Park in Johannesburg, where they played the '95 World Cup final. The Lions, the Golden Lions, the Lions, the old Transvaal team, that stadium. It's just huge historic stadium. It's where Nelson Mandela was wearing that number 6 jersey when he gave Francois Pienaar so that was probably, and you come out and then you take a dip from the change room. It's like, and then you come back upwards when you're coming out of the tunnel
Right.
and you just come up into this sort of cauldron. It's a long walkway from the changing rooms. And it's one of those ones where you hear it because of the noise with your studs and it's just everything about it. And then you come out and it's
You
really
feel that
dark.
aura, Ben? Yeah,
Yeah, I've got like
yeah,
tingles on my back now talking about it. And then it gets a bit lighter. And typically in Joburg, it's a beautiful sunny, blue sky type
yeah,
day, and you run out, and I played there a few times, and that was pretty incredible, just because of the history of that stadium. And you're
yeah.
staying. Like I said earlier, this locker was used by this player at the World Cup final, and that type of stuff is crazy.
It's
And the other
cool,
one
that.
is,
Yeah,
yeah, the other one was Loftus Versfeld, where again, I remember just arriving at Loftus for the first time where the Bulls play. It's a big, big
yeah,
stadium. Like both those stadiums are quite, 50,000 plus. And I think I never was intimidated playing in the stadium. I just enjoyed it. Even if they were all their opposition fans. Like when we played the Bulls away, I played in the Super Rugby warm up game, um, and and it wasn't full, but it was an amazing atmosphere. But it's just
yeah.
this historic stadium when you go in and you see all these famous old Springboks. You see all the Curry Cup stuff. You see the replica Curry Cups. You see all these huge photos. Loftus is a huge stadium. Like there's a little hospital department like in the bottom in the stand underneath the stand.
Right.
Like there's like an X-ray like room and stuff like that. It's bonkers.
Yeah.
Like so, and this was like 20 years ago. So it was like when you're walking in there, you're like, it's just everything about it is it's sort of historical, traditional, but also like huge and imposing. So they're probably the two that spring to mind.
There's not many Brits have been in them types of stadia and environments, mate, have they? It's something you should be really proud of.
Thanks, mate. Yeah, I think at the time I was probably maybe the first sort of Englishman to play in the Curry Cup at that,
Yeah.
or one of the first Englishmen to have done that and played in the Vodacom Cup and playing those types of games. So yeah, it was pretty cool. Yeah.
Oh, good, good. If you could tell a younger Ben something, what would it be and why?
It might sound a bit strange, but given the context, but probably just back yourself a bit more.
Mm.
I probably wouldn't, in some respects, like when I was talking about how I didn't speak until I was spoken to, with some of those coaches. I think just showing sometimes that comes across like you're disinterested. Um,
Yeah, it might have
or
back then, mate, but I think it's changed a bit now, hasn't it?
yeah.
Yeah,
So I probably would have been a bit more outspoken not in a rude way, but just in a bit more maybe bold in some situations.
yeah,
Probably that. Just back yourself. Don't if just go for it.
yeah. Microphones in your hand after a good win or an away game, and maybe a couple of beers. What are you giving us?
Oh, mate, this is a funny one because I always go to Stand By Me.
Do you?
But I'm the type of person who's reluctant to do it to get up, and then once
Yeah.
I'm on, I'm like I'm on a roll now. You can't get me off,
Why?
like.
No, but
But
I
no,
need to have had a few.
but then I'll kill it. No, I'm bad. I'm really bad, and everybody else will want me to stop. But then I'll be like, yeah, And then I typically I'll sing the melody as well, and I'll do like all the bits I'm not meant to. So yeah, yeah. So
Well,
yeah, it's
it's
always
what
good
it's
fun.
about, mate, in it. That's what we've said. It's about them moments, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, yeah. And if you're willing to, mate, a 1 to 15 that you've got ahead with.
Oh, once. Yeah, mate. I actually had to write something down here because
Yeah.
I was worried I wouldn't get. So yeah, I've taken a couple of liberties here, and I'll explain them as I go. Can I go through them one by one and
Of
actually
course you can, mate. Yeah.
explain a
Yeah,
bit?
yeah.
So Dave Flatman at Loosehead.
Yeah.
So I've fitted some guys in. So Dave Flatman, he's a funny guy. He was at Saracens with me. We didn't play much together, but just Flats is like he's well known as a TV pundit now. Hilarious guy. So I'd have him definitely in the team, um, just for he's brilliant, great vibe, good energy. At hooker, the French hooker Raf Ibanez, who
Yeah.
came to Wasps when I was there, he was the sort of quiet leader because there were so many leaders in that team, and I was peripheral because of the MRSA, and I wasn't a key player by any means. And that year that I was there, the club won the Heineken Cup, but Raf was incredible. He's the sort of leader who would just give you a wink and that you'd done something okay and sort of you had his respect and that meant a million more than a million words sometimes. And he achieved everything. Really good guy. Um, I, my number three is a guy called Beers. It's spelled Bees, and his second name is Roo, Roux, Roo. South African guy. In South Africa, people get these nicknames from a young age, and people don't necessarily like Rassie Erasmus, the South African coach. Rassie's not his real name. Rassie is his nickname because his real name is Johannes, but because he got called Rassie as a young boy, because the Erasmus people call you Rassie, so it's actually so BS in Afrikaans means beast. So this guy was called from a young age, and his parents called him Beers. It's like Beast Roo, like that's so that he's my tight head. So that's probably all you need to know about him.
Yeah.
But he's funny. He just used to always like chase. I used to take the Mickey out of him, and he used to chase me like around training before training. I'm gonna get you, Pommy, and he'd be like trying to get me, and he's about 140 kilos. He's trying to catch me, and I'd just be killing myself laughing, But he's a legend. In the second row, now the Saracens guy at number four, Danny Grucock. Um, I've got him in because this is a team that's probably going to fight a bit, and Danny could. No, it's going to be a physical team that can look after itself. Danny Grucock, he was a British and Irish Lion. Didn't play much with him either, but top guy. Just gave everything. A really good player. The other guy in the second row with him is a guy who was 2 meters. He's 2 meters six tall, 120 kilos. His name was Retief Ace. It's Retief Ace, and Retief, I played with in South Africa, and then he came over and he played for Narbonne and Brive in France. And he's the sort of typical South African who comes over, just does what they're asked to do, completely dominates the set piece, used to just beat people up every week, and it would just be what he did. Really physical. I remember once I went to watch him play. Like I didn't have a game at the weekend. We went down, we went down for a weekend, and Brive were playing Toulon, and it was in the old Pro D2, like before the top 14,
Yeah.
before they got promoted, and Retief was playing in the centre that day with Tana Umaga and Sonny Bill Williams. Sonny Bill had just arrived at Toulon, and I was just like, it was in the sun. It was like those typical French thing, you playing the drums, the trumpets is an incredible thing. But I just watched Retief was so fired up for this game. And he just he put his opposite man off. He hit him so hard about 3 times in the first 10 minutes. The guy went off injured. It was another South African, and he was really, so motivated to prove himself against another South African. And so he'd be in the second row with Danny Grucock. He would never take a backward step, but also a top guy. A lot of fun. And then number 6, Junior Paramore. Probably don't need to have to say any more about JP. He's like from earlier. He'd be taking names all day. And then I took a bit of a liberty at 7. There was a lot of people I could put in there. I could put Richard Hill, who was at Saracens with me, but I didn't really play with Hilly. Hilly was, he was playing and I wasn't, or he was away with England, so I didn't really play with Hilly. But he's probably one of the best players England have ever had. So, but
Yeah.
I put Dennis Betts at 7, and I didn't play with Dennis, obviously.
Yeah.
But he was part of that Wigan team, and he was like a real and so I've swam the channel with Dennis, so that's why I'm putting him in there. That's the connection. So I was a
Yeah.
bit tenuous, but he was a proper hard boy. He was playing in that Wigan team when he was 17, just
Yeah.
smashing grown men. And then he went into the NRL and did it there, and he's been involved in 3 World Cup finals. Not many people realise, as a coach as well. He's just like he's a proper legend that people he sails under the radar too much.
He
So
does. Yeah.
yeah, I would have him in this back row. So Junior Paramore at 6, Dennis at
Yeah.
7, and Lawrence Dallaglio at 8,
Yeah.
and that would be I can't see that back row going backwards.
No.
Yeah, Delalio was a guy that I always looked up to. I was lucky to be in that same environment as him at Wasps. Just incredible guy, incredible leader, incredible player. I reckon England's best ever 8, and there wasn't much he couldn't do, Lawrence. And an
Still a
amazing leader.
unit now, Ben, as well, isn't he?
Oh, mate, you should have seen him back in there back then.
Yeah.
That's 5, 6, 7 time when and or even before that when he won the World Cup in 03. Like he was just in unbelievable shape. Yeah, just a machine. Yeah, and he'd be the captain as well.
Right.
And then I've taken a liberty as well at 9, and I've gone a bit of a curveball. I would make Sean
Yeah.
Edwards my 9. And I explained the connection with Sean. There's been a couple of connections down the years with Sean, but he would be like I'd love to see him play in this team. And
Yeah.
he's a legend, smart guy, but the heartbeat as well. Him and Lawrence get on really, really well. A lot of respect between the two, so you can imagine them as an 8-9 combo. At
Imagine
10,
being the opposition 8 and 9.
oh
Nah.
mate, no. Well, imagine being the opposition like 9 or 10, and you got that back row, and then you got Sean
I
as
know.
well. Like it would be
No.
horrible. And then at number 10, I played with a guy called Yanni De Beer at London Scottish. Yanni played for South Africa against England. He kicked those 5 drop goals in that quarter
Okay.
final. In Paris when South Africa beat England in the quarter final in the '99 World Cup. It was Yanni playing and he kicked. If you can, people who have never seen that, go on YouTube it. He is kicking these drop goals from 40, 45 meters, and they're just
Everywhere.
sailing
Yeah.
miles over. It's just incredible performance. He could play. He could actually run a game, and he could play a running game as well. He was a good player, but because his kicking was so good, that's what he did a lot of, and what he was asked to do. But he was a great guy, great player, good mate, and looked after me. On one wing, I've got Dan Luger. He won a World Cup in 2003. Dan Luger, we played sevens together. He was in that sevens team as well in Dubai. So we played, yeah. So I'd have him on one wing, and on the
Yeah.
other wing, I've gone for. It was a bit difficult. I've gone for Dave Strettle, and Dave
Yeah. I,
Strettle
I
is,
used to think he was brilliant, Dave Strettle.
yeah. He was in that sevens team as well. So we
Yeah.
had
Strong,
Stret,
wasn't he, for like for then
yeah,
the winger weren't really like that then other than Ben Cohen, really, was he?
no,
And
yeah,
obviously Jonah, but Jonah's like generational, isn't he?
yeah, he's different. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, so one wing Lugs and the other wing Dave Stretz, and yeah, it was hard not to get. And yeah, at 12, I've gone for Henry Paul.
Yeah.
HP was, he could do everything, and he's probably the best player I reckon I played with. Um, and 13, I've gone for Mel Dean, a guy called Mel Dean. And Mel, I still see most days. I train with him when I can. He's a trainer now, looks after people. He trains people like Rio Ferdinand and Tom Hardy, Niall Horan. Um, Mel played in the centre for Richmond. He played in the centre for Harlequins. He played in the centre for Sale Sharks. He played for Connaught, and then he went on tour to New Zealand with Ireland. Um, and he didn't get capped. But he was an incredible player, really good at what he did. He was so good at identifying and knowing what his strengths were, and he was so strong carrying the ball. He could distribute, but he defensively strong, but also but he's a brilliant guy. Like brings so much energy, enthusiasm. Very funny guy. So in the team, he
Some
would be one.
career that though, isn't it, mate?
Say again.
Some career that, Ben, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was really appreciated. So if you speak to someone like Jason Robinson about their time at Sale, then you get an idea of how appreciated and how good Mel was. And he's one of those guys. There's someone like that from each of the clubs. Like I think Will Greenwood would say something similar from Harlequins, their time together at Harlequins. So he's that type of guy, you'd want to play next to. So
Yeah.
I reckon him and HP in the centres would be pretty, yeah, it would be quite solid and quite good. And it was hard not to get Tom Shanklin in there. I lived with Shanks when I was in Sarries. Shanks and Dave Flatman are best mates. Shanks played like 70 odd times for Wales, won the Grand Slams, was a Lion in '05 to New Zealand, like good player. So yeah, he would like, but he just loses out to those boys. And then at the back, got Nick Bendon on at
Yeah.
fullback. Nick Bendon only played for Bath. He went to play on Claremont. He played a few times for
Claremont,
England.
yeah.
Wasn't the biggest guy, really brave. We played sevens together. Yeah, but he'd be at the fullback. And then there's a few guys who are like, yeah, Tom Croft, who I played with as well, who's on the bench, and a few others who are, like Tom Shanklin as well.